board meeting of the Calaveras County Water District. Director Thomas will be about 10 minutes late, but we will begin. If you are able, will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. We will begin item number 2, public comment. These are for items that are, Thomas, welcome. These are for items that are not on the agenda. If you want to talk about something that's on the agenda later on, I will stop you and ask you to continue your comments when we get to that agenda point. So, is there any public comment at this time? Let's go.
Good afternoon, President Garamendi, directors. My public comment right now basically is to encourage you to relook at your previous strategic plan that addresses performance metrics and reconsider establishment of publicly readable, understandable metrics that helps them determine, are things getting better or staying the same or getting worse? The key things that we're trying to focus on is non-revenue water, ILI, INI, and improvement in all of those would be significantly helpful in putting downward pressure on rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment in the room? Public comment online? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, the consent agenda. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. Items will be acted on the board without discussion. Any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. Is there a board member that would like to remove one of the items from consent?
Second.
None. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Carries 5-0. Item number 4, public hearing. This is a public hearing on the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan update. This is a public hearing. I am now opening the hearing. Andrew?
All right. Well, thank you, members of the board. Welcome. Today with me, I have Katie Cole from Woodard and Kern, who has been helping us prepare our 2025 update of the Urban Water Management Plan. So what we're going to do is I'll have Katie come up and kind of introduce the basics of what the Urban Water Management Plan is, and then I will dive into a bit more of the detail of the findings and kind of the data that went into it, and we will take questions.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So as Andrew said, I'm just going to get us started with a couple introduction slides, and then Andrew will walk us through kind of key findings that we think are important to bring to your attention. So agenda for today, I'll walk through a quick introduction of what the Urban Water Management Plan is, what we're talking about, why we have to do it. We'll talk a little bit about the public outreach process and why that's so critical. And then we'll wrap up with key findings, our remaining schedule to get us through to submittal to the Department of Water Resources, and then we'll end with any questions. So the Urban Water Management Planning Act was adopted by the legislature in 1983. It is required for state loans and grants. So if that's something that the district continues to pursue, that you are required to have a current urban water management plan. It includes a kind of an attachment plan called a water shortage contingency plan that essentially looks at during periods of drought or other water shortage years, what is the district's plan for ensuring that demands during those periods are met. It's submitted every 5 years. So the last one was 2020. 2025 will be due to the department July 1st of this year. And it can either cover a calendar year or a fiscal year. The district does fiscal years just with for ease of reporting and how water data is collected and captured. Any requirements are dictated by the water code, but the Department of Water Resources does put out an urban water management plan guidebook, and that is what has been used, continues to be used to guide the development of the plan itself. The good news is that between 2020 and 2025, there were no substantial changes made to the water code that required substantial changes to the urban water management plan. So this update was a relatively streamlined version. If you pop open the urban water management plan, there are 10 chapters. This is required by the water code and the subsequent guidebook. Introduction, plan, prep are relatively straightforward chapters. Introduction is essentially an executive summary. Plan preparation details how the plan is prepared in alignment with the water code itself. System description outlines the district system, essentially the 4 service areas, the water and wastewater systems. Water use, pretty self-explanatory, gets into water demand and water use for the current kind of period of time for the year, as well as looking forward into the planning horizon, which is a 25-year planning horizon. Chapter 5, baselines and targets. This was kind of a holdover. This was from SB 7X7. The chapter in this version is essentially a paragraph that says that you all met your targets by 2020. So there's no other action that's needed. So it's a pretty streamlined section. System supplies, again, straightforward, looking at supplies for your service areas. Supply reliability assessment compares those supplies and demands. Water shortage contingency plan, if there are shortages, what does the district plan on doing with those? You have a very robust water shortage contingency plan that you did in 2020, and that is being maintained in this plan. Demand management measures, what sort of conservation actions does the district have in place, and would you put in place if there continues to be a shortage in any of these dry periods? And then chapter 10 is adoption, submittal, and implementation. How does this get adopted? How does it get submitted to the state? Again, kind of a requirements chapter. So as far as public outreach and involvement process, the initial preparation notices that are required by the water code were sent out in February, essentially letting everyone in your service area know that the district was going to be updating this document. Newspaper notices for this public hearing were published per the requirement. We're here holding this public hearing today, and then public comments will be due May 31st. We had a 30-day public comment period that opened at the beginning of this month. And then as far as, once we get those public comments, Andrew will walk through schedule, but we'll be getting those incorporated, responding to them, and then getting that document in to the state by July 1st. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who will walk you through key findings.
Hey, thanks, Katie. All right. So at the basic level, being that CCWD has 6 service areas that are generally, well, they are not necessarily generally, but they are independent. But each of the 6 service areas share the same water source across 3 watersheds. So the urban water management plan is evaluated and presented by 4 subregions. Subregion A is the Calaveras River for Jenny Lind and Sheep Ranch service area. Subregion B is the Stanislaus River for Evetts Pass and Copper Cove, Copperopolis. Subregion C is the McCollum River watershed, and that is in West Point service area. And then subregion D is groundwater for Wallace. So we have the task of evaluating each one of these various water supplies and demands across our various service areas. One key component of evaluating and projecting demand and supply is understanding the population projections for the county and the service areas or CCWD's customers. The California Department of Finance projects roughly a 10% decrease in Calaveras County population between 2025 and 2050. And what we found as that relates to CCWD's service area is roughly an 11% decrease in population across all 6 of our service areas. This information is directly provided from, as I mentioned, the California Department of Finance, and the report is published as P2A total population for California and counties. And just to note that in that, there is a projected 4% increase in California population during this time.
That, our population is 30,000 because I thought.
The county is 45, our service area is 30, yeah. So if we break that down by service area, generally speaking, each of the service areas are going to be decreasing in population by that 11%. So even though that these numbers are generally larger, say in the subregion A, which is Jenny Lind and Sheep Ranch, or in West Point and so on in Ebbets Pass, that they all kind of equate to that 11% decrease. So similarly, if we evaluate the demand expected as we look out into the planning horizon 2050, we also see a decrease in demand. This is notable because of the projected decrease in population of the service areas, but also there is a component of all other potable demand, which includes things like landscape irrigation and water loss. So we do expect to see reductions in landscape irrigation as water use efficiency standards are applied. And we also expect to see reduction in water loss as the district continues to improve its ability to reduce those system losses. Okay, on the flip side of demand, we have supplies, which the district has a hearty amount of supply, which is great. So as we look here, the total supply is that top row, which indicates the total amount of supply available to the district. And then we have those demand totals as applied for the projected demand as just discussed. And the difference there is the amount of water available outside of the demand. If we break this down by subregion A has a supply amount of around 8,500 acre feet, and this is New Hogan supply in conjunction with riparian rights and Big Trees Creek rights. Subregion B, Stanislaus River, is our largest amount of supply, being that we have a large amount of storage in New Spicer Meadow, but we also have some recycled water supply in the Stanislaus area, primarily to provide recycled water to the golf courses down in the Copperopolis area. Subregion C is the Moke. The current minimum amount of supply there is around 2,000 acre feet, and that's from Bear Creek. And if needed, we have a water service agreement with CCWD to receive Shad's water if, in fact, we have a drought supply issue. And then, of course, there's groundwater use in Wallace, which equates to around 65 acre feet a year. And that will likely continue to stay at around 65 acre feet or less than 100 acre feet.
Excuse me, Andrew.
Sure.
Can you go back to that slide? Is it reasonable to assume that some downstream entities are going to be looking at that particular slide and saying, aha, Calaveras County Water District is only using less than 10% of the water that they have available? Are we going to be unusually vulnerable to losing that water supply total?
I don't necessarily think we're at risk of losing that supply total. There will be a process when we go to perfect our water rights that would evaluate those conditions. But that's a future scenario that isn't necessarily tied to the urban water management planning effort. This is really for the district to understand what is available and what is being used. So if that's what you mean, if
Well, it's a public document, and if downstream people their demands are going up and ours are staying steady or going down, looks like our water is ripe for picking, so to speak.
Sure, but the water is currently tied up in our owned water rights.
Okay.
So it would have to be a water rights petition.
Thank you.
Moving on to continuing with the supplies here, but if we were to look at the supplies in terms of if there were a dry year scenario, and what we're considering a dry year is the fourth year of a multi-year drought. So what would the supply and the demand figures look like in that case? As you can see here, the supply in the region 1 in the Calaveras River will generally meet the demand. Ebbets Pass also would meet the demand. West Point gets a little bit tighter in terms of the supply meeting the demand, but it generally does. And then in Wallace, we would effectively have a scenario where we have to initiate our water shortage contingency plan, which is a process that we'll discuss here in a little bit. So the water shortage contingency plan includes various steps in terms of what is termed the shortage stage. So depending on the amount of supply the amount of supply that is being reduced relative to the demand, which particular stage would we effectively initiate, and what sort of actions are associated with that. So of the 6 voluntary or stages, we have the voluntary and early warning, significant, severe, and critical. So if we were to revisit the dry year scenario of a 4-year drought in Wallace, that would likely trigger a stage 4, stage 5 shortage contingency stage, which would require the district to reach out to various water users and apply some conservation measures and so on. Another key component of the urban water management planning effort is reviewing the water use objective, and a component of the water use objective is system water losses, which each of these items, the water use objective, is a state standard that the district is required to meet, and kind of dovetailed into that water use objective is the water loss standard, which is another regulatory component of this that is set to become active in 2028. So currently, the district is meeting the urban water use objective by a fair margin, which is good. The water use objective is projected out to 2040, so that's when the district will have to reevaluate and see where they're at, and that objective will decrease over time into that 2040 horizon. And currently, as I mentioned, the relevant demand is within the water use objective, which is a good thing. Now, that box around the water loss, we do, and we've had public comment on this item. We do see that the district is currently not meeting the water loss standard. And this is kind of how a schematic to highlight or visualize how the water loss standard fits into the water use objective here. So the water use objective incorporates basically all different types of use that that the district supplies. And part of that supply is water loss, which is a separate, as I mentioned, kind of bucket, so to say, of water that also has a standard to it. The current range of the water loss standard, which is evaluated as gallons per service connection per day, is roughly 22 gallons per service connection per day to 25, meaning that the district should not be losing in system losses any more than 25 gallons per service connection per day. That particular standard is provided to us by the State Water Resources Control Board and is actually equivalent to other systems that may not be as relatable to the CCWD system. For example, that range I provided also is the same range or the same value for the city of Stockton or the city of Hayward or the city of Palo Alto. Very municipal systems, not necessarily a one-to-one with our geography, certainly, and the way that water is produced and supplied in the 6 various service areas of the district. So that is to say, the standard itself provided by the state is likely not representative to CCWD system, but there is a need for the district to more fully understand the data and the methods of collecting those data and understanding various efforts that can take place to address that.
Drew, quick question. As we look at these standards, are we seeing an improvement since we've replaced the tanks and we're replacing a lot? I mean, there's a lot of work going on. Are we able to track yet how that's been reducing our loss?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen significant improvements. Say in Ebbets Pass, for example, replacing all the Tychite, I think it's called. Yeah, a lot of transmission main in Ebbets Pass, a lot of pressure reducing valves and the tanks, the redwood tanks, for example. That's all noticeably punctuated in the data itself. However, I will preface that though by saying the water loss numbers that we're seeing are still higher than the relative to the standard. And that could be a whole host of things, including how we're evaluating the data and doing some quality assurance, quality control on those data, but also looking to other potential projects and fixes that might address that.
So when we look at, so they've got their standard, we don't agree with it, but we've got our numbers. We're seeing a correct trend lines going in the right way.
It's going the right way. And so what another step that we're going to take, and I was just getting to this, that the Water Resources Department in coordination with ops and engineering are going to be looking at a plan to basically mitigate the losses. So one is we see this declining trend based on the various projects that have been incorporated or implemented to date, but we can also come at it from below and petition the State Water Board to adjust our standard that would be more representative of our system. And one example of that adjustment would be what they call the infrastructure condition factor. And this is just a value that they incorporate into their modeling. And their default value is assuming that your infrastructure is brand new, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we can apply or petition the state board to adjust that number and increase that that infrastructure factor to indicate that, yeah, the system is older than brand new, and that would help adjust it.
I'm curious. I mean, we've only had these modern meters in now for a couple of years. So, I mean, how good is the information from that we had with the old meters? I mean, is it, we really don't have that much time with these accurate meters. Is there any way to measure that? Or I guess my question is, did we compare an annual usage with the new meters compared to the old meters? Have we done that? We know what the difference was?
Yeah, and I'll jump in here real quick, Andrew. I was going to touch on this because Andrew mentioned the data processing and it's a work in progress, right? So we have a lot more data now than we had even just a couple of years ago, but we're still, finding our ability to process all that data, make sure that it's accurate, and then also identifying areas where we need yet more. We need distribution system meters, so we're not just tracking consumption based on customer meters. We need to be able to track more precisely where water is moving through the system. So there's still a lot of room for improvement when it comes to both our ability to use all the data that we have and optimizing the system to improve our data collection. But going back before the AMI meter installation is, we know those meters were unreliable. That's one of the challenges, I think, when we look at the longer term trends, is how many different variables are, there's a lot of different moving pieces in those trends. The infrastructure work that we've done, but also, the data collection, water conditions, a lot of different things are changing from year to year that influence that data.
And maybe I would add to that, that the data component is part of this plan moving forward. And what we're really going to be looking at, it's really understanding those data and how they compare to past historic data collection efforts, but also improving the district's ability to use this new AMI data in an efficient way. So that's one component. The other component is working with the state board to adjust our standard to make it more representative of the district. And then the third program is working internally with the other departments to understand how the various projects that are planned or implementing currently will and have a positive effect on the water loss component.
Andrew, one thing that I think I've asked this question before, but I want to drill down on it a little deeper. But we pay a fairly significant amount of money to the fire districts around the county, around our district, to flow our meters. And then there are fire events that I can see Copperopolis fire. We were tapping so many hydrants there for a long, long time that's the equivalent of serving every house in the Copperopolis area for a month in a 3-day fire. How do we adjust for those fire flows or flushing flows? We don't have flow meters on every hydrant.
Right. Well, when those meter or the hydrants are being used for various operations, they technically should have a meter on them, and I think that is the correct operating procedure. Or whoever is operating that has to have some ability to volumetrically collect that amount of water they're using. So in the water loss audit that the water loss basically process for the state, they incorporate that as unbilled, unmetered water. So it's a or unbilled metered water if we have so the point being is that it's captured and it's incorporated and reduced from the actual system losses. It should be. How accurate those data collection efforts are, it's debatable.
Well, and just to clarify here, I think there's also that distinction between emergency. We're not putting meters on when there's an emergency.
Right.
There are other ways to back into that data, just the time of flow. We can look at SCADA, how much water we were producing during that time. There's other ways to kind of estimate how much water we think was used during an emergency. And then our operators are the ones that are operating flushing operations. And so they'll track that information to make sure it's not counting as, we don't want that water to count as water loss,
right.
System loss. It gets accounted for separately.
And we get those numbers from ops, from Pat.
Damon, do you have something?
Damon, come up to the microphone.
Exactly. They'll give you an estimate of how many times a water truck pulled from a system. They'll give you a rough estimate. And like Michael talked about before, we can push that up against production from the treatment facility and get a fairly good idea of what the use was during an emergency. And we provide that to Andrew and his team.
Well, it just it seems like the state is asking for accuracy to 3 or 4 places past the decimal point on gallons, and it's just it's not possible in my view that you could have that kind of accuracy when at various organizations are letting the hydrants flow without meters on them. But anyway, I know you're doing the best you can, or the district's doing.
And I think this comes back to that relationable, comparable standard with other municipalities and other urban water agencies, because of those sorts of calculations, and that accuracy could potentially be much higher in the dense urban area and so on. So, but yeah, we're trying to incorporate that best we can.
Thank you.
And, Andrew, as you gather the more data on this and we get better at it, we should share that data, because I think I can't imagine it's doing anything but move it in the right direction with all the infrastructure improvements.
Absolutely. And once we have a better, as I keep mentioning, we're kind of at the early stages of developing this path forward related to the water loss in terms of a plan and understanding what needs to happen. We will certainly keep all apprised of that.
If I could, since Director Thomas set this soapbox up for me, I'm just going to climb on it for just a second, because this has been an issue, I think a pet peeve of mine for a while is just, I think the unappreciated or unaccounted for cost of improving data infrastructure for regulatory compliance. Something that isn't tracked closely enough. That it's an additional cost on water agencies to put huge investments into our data infrastructure for the purpose of regulatory compliance. And it's not viewed as an unfunded mandate, but it is, and there's more coming in addition to the improvement to data that we need for water use efficiency. GIS dialed in detailed system maps are going to be required. It's going to be a huge lift for us. There's a lot of other data infrastructure requirements that come along with state regulations that I think disproportionately impact smaller rural agencies like us, and I don't think it's talked about enough.
Agreed.
Have your soapbox.
Maybe I'll take it and try to wrap it up here. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes of it. So here we are today on the 27th. As Katie had pointed out, the public comment period ends on the 31st, which just want to acknowledge that we did receive the CCERC comment today, and the Lake Tulloch. I'm going to blank on it, but we did receive it. And we'll incorporate those comments into the finalized plan, which is looking like to be published on June 15th. And then we will bring it back to the board on the 24th for adoption, and we'll get it wrapped up and sent off to DWR by the July 1 deadline. And with that,
Public hearing, questions from the board, Trevor?
A couple of questions. Well, first, a statement. I guess looking at this, if we were to have a 10% decrease in population and increasing costs of infrastructure, not good news rates, because you have few there of that. I did a quick search while you were talking, and there's a quote. Official long-term projections generally show modest growth, not decline, through 2050. For California Department of Finance actually shows about a 20%. That was for Calaveras County as a whole, but certainly that would factor into our service areas. So I guess, does the plan offer a plan for the possibility of increased population growth? Flexibility in it?
I think the short answer is no, not really. And we're kind of looking at the population component pragmatically, looking straight from the data provided by the Department of Finance, which they do a population projection. They have a whole methodology and so on from 2020 to 2070. And based on those data as they're presented, that's what we're showing here. So not necessarily any speculative narrative, a narrative component of it. It's strictly from their data methodology. That's right.
Doesn't feel that way. Unclear.
That is certainly true.
I'll just chime in on that one real quick too, because this has been a challenge for us. I think, and not just us, we've talked to other agencies that operate in areas where there's a lot of seasonal variability. And so coming up with an accurate number of the population served, which may not be the same as the population of the community, the full-time population of that community, is another kind of imprecise part of the formula here. And then I would just add to, a reduction in number of people doesn't necessarily equate to a reduction in the number of households. Might be fewer people per household. So I don't know how, and we may not be able to know how it's going to necessarily affect our customer base. And it may be an increase in our customer base if we have areas like Valley Springs that are developing, and it's shifting population rather than even if it's an overall decline. So it's really hard to predict the population changes.
Water supply, a lot of unknown.
We did, the Department of Water Resources has a seasonal population calculation tool that was developed kind of at the request of places like Lake Tahoe and Joshua Tree and so on. And we have taken the steps to run that analysis, and we have incorporated it into the urban water management plan. But as Michael said, we're not fully confident.
Well, personally, and I don't have the data to back this up, I still think it undercounts, right? When you have, a community like Arnold that goes from 4,000 people to 20,000 people on 4th of July weekend, how do you gauge that impact for a small water agency?
Right.
I don't know that it's fully captured.
When we did the census in 2020, there was a clear decline in population, just in aggregate numbers, and our population's getting older. We're losing kids. We've got a population problem, and we're all part of the solution, I suppose. But I don't know if it's going to be as serious as that. But there's no doubt we're going down in population.
No, and that's exactly what I was thinking is what are they taking in? What is that finance department? It's the state finance department that you said the number came from.
Right.
Yeah. What all data are they taking into consideration? That one fire in Calaveras County, I think we lost 11,000 people.
Not quite that many, but they were displaced. About half of them came back.
Okay.
Yes, we took a hit.
But if we have another fire in the county, which is data like that going into this equation?
I'm not sure where they're getting theirs. I'm just speaking from the census.
Yeah, right. And I think some of from what I've seen, at least, they do incorporate what they call migrant populations, which would be something like a wildfire-induced migration of folks out of the county. And they also incorporate kind of birth rates based on hospital data and death rates. And
I found the report to be really comprehensive. There's a lot of good data in there. I appreciated it. Going through it in detail, it's a nice reference to things that are going on and meeting the state's. Well, So before I open back up to the public for comment, any other questions from the board? All right, we'll move to public comment on as part of this hearing. It's a public hearing. I won't stick you to 3 minutes, but I'd appreciate it.
Afternoon, Mike Rogers from Valley Springs. Regarding the comments about the water losses due to the fire event, and this maybe is a question for Damon. So my understanding is that the tanks, the supply tanks have flow meters or level indicators in the tanks, and you have meter data, use meter data. So if you deduct the meter, you take a point A to point B timeline, you look at your tank levels, subtract your meter usage data minus your non-revenue water losses, which are say 3%. Would that not give you some accurate
Mike,
measurement?
we're going to do all the comments and then they're going to come up and rebut. So you have more time if you'd like to keep going. Okay, good question. Yeah. I know. Other public comment, Francisco, Michael, we'll come back on and answer these.
Thank you. Francisco de la Cruz, Valley Springs. Good afternoon. I'm speaking regarding the formal adoption of the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan and Water Shortage Contingency Plan. While I recognize the coordination required to draft these compliance blueprints, this board faces a severe data integrity barrier that prevents a valid certification today. Under California law, a public comment window requires that accurate, verifiable baseline metrics be available so that ratepayers can form intelligent conclusions. As of this moment, the draft document published on the district website remains fundamentally broken. Critical forecasting blocks, specifically Table 7-4, which governs our multiple dry year supply and demand comparisons, contains blank, pound, REF, exclamation point calculation errors. Furthermore, Section 9.4 references an Appendix O that doesn't exist. That particular table is the exact data matrix required to mathematically prove whether this district experiences a physical supply deficit during multiple year drought. It is a foundation upon which your emergency drought rate surcharges are legally justified. If our own dry year resilience tables are throwing spreadsheet error codes in the public record, this board cannot fiduciarily certify that this drought planning or rates are mathematically proportionate under Prop 218. Correcting after the fact means the public was forced to evaluate an invalid draft. Furthermore, Table 4-13 of the draft admits the system is leaking 429 million gallons of water annually. However, it's described as 1,300 and something acre feet, which I will challenge anybody to wrap their hand around. Millions of gallons versus acre feet. 1,300 sounds like, man, that's not too bad. 429 million, that's a lot of water. That's going straight into the ground. Or 89.3 gallons per connection per day, straight into the dirt. Locking in an inflated 2.5 infrastructure condition factor, that ICF that Andrew talked about, as a permanent baseline asks ratepayers to permanently subsidize preventable system waste. We urge this board to execute a fiduciary deferral today. Instruct the staff to rebuild the broken dry year ledgers, align the models with the $16.8 million treasury interest that we talked about before, and establish a formal metric to target to reduce the 2.5 ICF that you're requesting by 0.1 annually to save up to a potential $2.6 million annually. Recall that Amador and Tuolumne operate with ICFs of 1.2 and 1.4. How do they do it? Figure it out. Maybe it's infrastructure, maybe it's not. And as far as projects in the forthcoming planning year, we've encouraged a focus on 3 tiers. Regulatory safety, tier 1, efficiency, tier 2, efficiency meaning less water loss, less NRW, less I&I infiltration and all of that, because it means less money out of the ratepayer's pocket. And now with freezing in a decline in population, recalled in the last 2023 cost of service study, you assumed 0 population growth. That's in the 2023 cost of service study. One of the assumptions was 0 population growth. That kept rates divided amongst the same people over 5 years. Now it's going to be declining population growth. That only means one thing. I think the director identified it earlier. That means everybody's got to pay a little more. So it becomes even more critical that we pick the right projects. Now, I've been in at least 3 meetings where data reliability has been mentioned. Oh, we got to get better. Oh, we got to get better. Well, I don't see any CIP projects that I can uniquely identify as it's going to make better data, except for the one that the HRD or HDR engineers are supposed to deliver, where they're going to have you establish a formal framework to do asset management that would help you make decisions on are we replacing the right asset at the right time, or are we just blowing smoke? I urge you to take a pause. It's not going to kill anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments in the room? Online? One down, ma'am.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Bernadette Catania. I'm from Copperopolis, and I'm part of the Lake Tulloch Weed Alliance. We're going to change it to Environmental Alliance, I believe. But we just we did submit comments, I believe, today. So we're hoping Andrew will take a look at those and incorporate them in. And just that the problem has gotten really bad with the weeds. And even just recently, over the last few days, I don't know if you guys checked the water quality, but the lake is kind of a green color, and there's been a lot of algae this year. And so not sure about the pHs, but it's a real concern that's possibly the weeds that are causing that. So if we could look into that, that would be great. Thank you.
Very well. Andrew, Damon, do you want to rebut it or anything?
Like, if I understand your question in the public comment, it was trying to get at, can we understand real time what water demand is during a wildfire condition from monitoring the drop in the tank level? So the short answer is somewhat, but the long answer is you got to incorporate all of the meters that are also being served by that section of the system. And the systems are unique in that pressure zones are not necessarily closed and provided water by 1 or 2 tanks. So depending on how pressure fluctuates within the system, can open and close different pressure zones, because we're risk averse. So that portion of the water system, we don't want to ever reduce capacity to the point where we're unsure if we're going to be able to provide capacity, particularly in an emergency. So the pressure reducing valves are designed, Kevin's team designs these systems so that they can open and push water into the zone, so which takes demand off the tank. So we can and we can't. And I think Andrew alluded to it earlier, that as we start to really kind of refine our understanding of where water flows in the system and how it flows, one of the tools we're going to have to use is distribution system metering. So that would allow us to know, we could put a meter on a trunk line that comes off a certain tank and feeds a certain subdivision, so to speak, for example, and that would allow us to better understand what's going on there.
Thank you.
Certainly, thank you for your comments. And I think this is the point of the public hearing and the public review process, is to help our team identify issues such as the data table missing particular values or the erroneous appendix being called out. Director Garamendi found some typological errors as well in some of the values that we were reporting for the West Point water supply and demand. CCIRC also submitted a letter that identified some of those same typological errors. And also in terms of some of the data consistency throughout the document, we will consider the fact that we probably need to, or we do need to be more explicit on when we're using volumes for potable demand and supply versus potable and non-potable demand and supply. I think that was something that was brought up by CCIRC, so we can be more clear there. In terms of the water loss, I think we've talked about that pretty extensively here today, and a big conclusion or key takeaway from this urban water management planning effort, from my perspective, is sitting down and thinking hard about that water loss plan effort and how we can pragmatically move forward and with all of the constraints and all, quite frankly, some of the challenges, but also the various opportunities we have in terms of better data and all the projects that we do have going in. I'll leave it at that.
All right, I am now closing the public hearing. There's no other further action required on this item today. So we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, everybody, and good input from everybody. New business presentation, district investment strategies by Chandler Asset Management. Kelly Zanheiser, come on down.
Afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Huntley from Chandler. Steve, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right, so Steve is going to do a presentation on our investment portfolio that Chandler manages for our organization. So I'll leave it to.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Am I able to share my screen, or is the presentation already viewable in your room?
If you could share your screen, Steve, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Looks like that option is not available to me. So I don't know if someone who set up the meeting can allow me to do that, or if
Test his microphone a little bit. I can't hear him.
I can just reference the page in the report, if that would help.
We're gonna allow you to share it. So hang on one second, please.
Sure. Thank you.
Phones don't work.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh, looks like I have the ability to share here, so give me just a moment.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll bring that up and hopefully technology will align and I can still see you and you can see my report. Would you let me know if that's visible? Hopefully you can see that green report.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today and present in front of the board. Again, my name is Steve Huntley. I am a senior portfolio strategist here at Chandler Asset Management. I may be a new face to you. I'm pretty sure that you have, or at least some of you have met Kara. She's on my team as well. We're both on the investment team here at Chandler Asset Management, and we are honored to be able to help you fulfill your fiduciary duty. So as your investment advisor, we share that duty with you. And so we take the investment and management of public funds very seriously. And just by way of a short introduction, I do have a little bit of a unique background. In addition to serving in the securities industry, I also spent 15 years in the public sector as well. I worked for Tulare County here in the Central Valley of California. And then I spent about 12 years as a finance director for a small city. So I know what it's like to deal with water issues. So very passionate about helping to manage funds well to meet those needs. So without further ado, I do want to just give you a couple of takeaways on what's been going on with your portfolio and the market in general and why that matters to your portfolio. So first and foremost on your screen, on the left-hand side, this is the non-farm payroll metric for the last couple of years. And you can see there was a downward decline. And so the Federal Reserve decided to take action to combat this downward decline in job creations by stimulating the economy. And they did that by cutting rates 3 different times, 25 basis points each, for a total of 0.75%. And so what that means for your portfolio is that this was generally good. There's an inverse relationship between rates and the prices of bonds, which you're allowed to invest in. You are subject to Government Code Section 53601, which says that you can only invest in certain types of securities, primarily bonds. And so the inverse relationship, as those rates came down, the price or the value of your bonds went up. And this is one of the things that we manage. We actively manage your portfolio to accomplish. So we anticipated these rates, and so your portfolio grew in value as a result. However, that got us to February, where we experienced the market's reaction to the war in the Middle East and the conflict that's unfolding there. Of course, at this point, that's being responded to as a inflationary spike due to the constraint on crude oil being shipped out of the Middle East. So with about 20 to 25% of crude oil not available, of course, that has caused, because there's a decrease in supply, the price because of the demand is going up. And so we've all experienced more expensive gas, but this is now trickling into the economy and having a wider impact beyond just gas prices and diesel prices. So that is where we get to the second mandate of the Federal Reserve, which is, in addition to keeping the country employed, or at least allowing the conditions so that can happen, is also managing prices or inflation. You can see both these charts here on the page have spikes in the recent month that show those inflationary factors due to energy prices going up. And so in the spite of this, the consumer has been pretty much resilient, although pessimistic. And this is because not all consumers are facing this challenge of inflation with the same hardiness. Those that are on the upper half of the K, as they recall, they call this the K-shaped recovery. Those on the top half are really responding better because they have more wealth and are able to build wealth faster. And those on the bottom half of the K are suffering the higher prices due to the inflationary aspects of energy prices going up. We do see that some of the leading indicators are telling us that although the economy is still chugging along, it's going along at a slower rate than before. We're seeing that also home prices, while still growing, are growing at a reduced rate as well. And this is also caused by higher rates. The cost of borrowing money to buy more expensive homes is going up, and that's making it difficult for people to sell homes at a higher price. We do have good news as far as services and manufacturing. These are both in expanding territory as far as the consensus is concerned. And so the expectations for 2026 is that GDP, gross domestic product, will increase about 2 to 2.2%, pending what's going on with the Iran conflict. So still growth, but slower than in years past. And this chart also just shows what's been going on with the Federal Reserve. In addition to cutting rates, they've also been slightly stimulative in injecting a little bit more cash into the system by not unwinding their balance sheet as quickly as they had in the past. They're actually adding to it a little bit. But to add to this, we've had a very divided Federal Reserve Board, more divided than in the last 30 years. Their vote in April was the most divided vote since 1992. Now that there's a new chair, all eyes are on him to see what he will be able to do as far as building consensus and making decisions about where monetary policy should head from here on out. And so what we saw as a result of the conflict in Iran is this yield curve on the right. This is how we measure what's going on in the bond market. The dotted gray line represents January, and you can see the solid green line represents April. So the entire yield curve has moved up, and there's multiple reasons why this has happened. The very front end of the yield curve, the shortest maturities, this has been boosted up by the Iran conflict and the inflationary factors that have been going on. The middle of the curve has been boosted by an enormous amount of debt that's been issued by technology companies funding their AI capital expenditures. And the long end of the curve has been boosted because of ongoing deficits at the federal level. And so those financial issues are being punished, as it were, by higher rates set by the bond market. So the yield curve has moved up, and this has had headwinds and tailwinds for your portfolio. So the headwinds is that the bonds that you already hold have reduced in value slightly. This is just on paper. We have not realized those losses, but it's also a tailwind in that as you have maturities and the securities that we invest for you are come due for reinvestment, we're able to reinvest those at higher rates for the long run. So that's my brief update on the economy. And what does that mean for your portfolio? Well, it means that your average purchase yield is now about 4.1%. So regardless of what's going on in the market, the actual cash payments of interest that you'll be receiving is about 4% for the year. And your total value of what we're managing for you is about 21.8 million at this point. So you are in great shape. You have high quality investments. So despite the volatility and the uncertainty in the market right now, your portfolio is performing well. And your performance overall has shown that on this page, page 25 of the report, you can see for the 12-month period, a 3.48% return compared to your benchmark at only 3.01. And over the last 2 years, averaging 5.51% return compared to the benchmark of 5.15. So I will keep my report short there unless there's any questions that I can help to answer. If there's anything specific you'd like to chat about with the economy or with the performance of the portfolio as a whole, I'll leave it there.
First questions? Board members' questions? Seeing none. This informational item, but we will do public comment. Please keep it to 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. As I recall, the 2023 cost of service study assumed an investment return at about 1.5% to 2%. We're experiencing 4%. That's a nice cushion. I'd ask you to consider some rate relief. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment in the room? Comment online? All right, this is a informational item. Thank you very much, Chandler Asset Management.
Thank
Moving on
you.
to moving on to item 5B, discussion direction regarding fiscal year 2026-27 preliminary operating and capital improvements programs budgets. Kelly.
I'll get started while we work this out. Good afternoon, President Garamendi, members of the board, and members of the public. Today, we are presenting the district's 26-27 preliminary budget for your review and discussion. This budget represents many months of work by staff across all departments in CCWD. And they've worked very hard to evaluate the operational needs, infrastructure priorities, financial obligations, and long-term sustainability goals for the district. This budget is designed to support the district's core mission of providing safe, reliable water and wastewater services while maintaining compliance, while maintaining compliance with increasingly complex regulatory requirements and continuing to address aging infrastructure throughout the systems. As the board is aware, utilities across California continue to face significant financial pressures related to many factors, especially increasing infrastructure replacement needs. This budget attempts to balance the various factors with our responsibility to remain mindful of ratepayers' impacts and maintain long-term financial stabilities. The budget before you will reflect several key priorities: maintaining reliable day-to-day operations, funding critical capital infrastructure improvements, meeting debt obligations, supporting emergency preparedness and operational resiliency, and positioning the district for long-term financial stability. We're going to walk through thank you. Let's see. So our outline for today is to focus on the CIP projects and funding. And for that portion, I'm going to get some help from my friends Kevin and Damon to speak to the projects and the needs that they have for their respective divisions. We've got our budget challenges, water, wastewater, and hydropower operations, payroll and staffing, capital outlay, debt services, fund balance projections, and our budget assumptions as we move through this. And the next steps. This presentation is intended to provide the board with an opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback, and give direction to staff prior to final adoption in June. I'd like to thank all of the departments for their support and cooperation during the budget development process, and we appreciate the board's support and continued guidance through this process and look forward to a very informative discussion today. All right, we're going to get going with the slides. So our first slide is the CIP water budget. We've got the budget assumes that we are successful in our grant applications, and I would like to invite Damon and Kevin up to answer any questions that you may have on any specific projects.
Kelly, can I ask a question about the CIP?
Absolutely, sir.
So our budget goes out with our rate increases to 2028, and then the projections go flat after that.
Correct.
So, you know, obviously things generally don't go flat. So I guess I'm just curious. I feel like we're solid to 2028 when we project out. Not so sure those are. So I'm questioning about the variances.
Sure.
And whether by the time we get to those projects, the money may be there or may not be there.
You're assuming a pay-go situation that we bring in enough money to cover the magnitude of projects that we have. I think looking at it now without projecting out future rate increases, at this point in time, I don't think we can assume what those rate increases would be without a full study and a Prop 218 process. So yes, you're probably right. The variance will be lower. How much it will be lower, I think as we move through the presentation, you'll see the magnitude is pretty great. So
right.
I don't know that we'll get
I
out
just,
of it with
I just want a little asterisk next to it.
Absolutely.
Saying these are best guesses.
asterisks. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, some of the revenue sources we can project beyond that point, property tax
Sure.
doesn't change all that
Gonna go up
much.
2%. Right?
But when it comes to, we didn't make any assumptions about future rates beyond the current rate schedule.
Right, because I was looking at our line, we go like this and then flat. But just disclaimer.
Yeah, so I kind of go through kind of a high level. We've discussed these projects in detail during the engineering committee. I think most of you probably listened to that, and a lot of people here today were in that committee meeting. But we have in Copper Cove, we got the Lake Tollick intertie project that we plan on advertising here in the next couple of weeks. That's a private placement loan funded project, so the money's already accounted for in debt service. And then we got the Copper Cove C-tank transmission pipeline. The pipeline's all in the ground, and we just have left for next fiscal year is the booster pump station portion of the project. We got that accounted for there. And the Copper Cove water treatment plant rehabilitation project. This is just the filters that's ongoing at the water treatment plant. And they should be close to being done here around the fiscal year. So there's opportunity that some of that money won't be used, but we got a plan for it. So the Burns Ferry water tank, this project's tied in with the Lake Tollick intertie project. So that's taking the water from C tank around to Poker Flat. This tank will allow us to maintain the system. So we'll have storage on the east side of Lake Tollick. Currently, all our storage is on the west side of Lake Tollick. This would allow us to store water there and control pressures, maintain fire suppression supplies on that side of the lake. And then we got the sawmill tank that's in construction now. Hunter's Raw Water, Big Trees Pump Station 4, and Timber Trails are all projects that are in the active grant process. The Timber Trails, we're submitting the grant here in this next month. And the Hunter's Raw Water and Big Trees 1 and 4. Hunter's Raw Water is already approved by FEMA. And then Big Trees Pump Station 1 and 4, those projects were sent from Cal OES to FEMA for their concurrence on funding those projects. So we have a good shot at getting the funding to complete those projects. That's a 75 to 25% share. The Larkspur Pump Station, this one's electrical and rehab. There's some severe electrical problems at this pump station, arc flash and other issues that need to be corrected. The Clearwell project, that's a project that's out past this current rate study, and we're planning on doing that after that. So that's why it shows a negative on their variance. Pathway Pines and Sunrise Point, these are two of our oldest distribution systems in the entire district, and they're in very bad condition. Old galvanized pipe, a lot of problems. They don't have any fire hydrants that up in that whole area that can supply water for fire suppression. Hunter's raw water treatment and water quality improvements. This goes back to the issues that we had in the past with disinfection byproducts in the system. So we're focusing some money on trying to remove the total organic carbon in the system to reduce disinfection byproduct issues within our system that are going to be a huge priority here in the future with the regulations that are coming forward. Moran valve automation. This is a valve that controls our Pine Brook tank. So it directs water up to a 1 million gallon tank that serves the homes around Moran Road. It's really critical. It's gone out several times in some storm events we've had. Hunter's next one, Sheep Ranch raw water and pump station. So this is the pump station that relies on an old flume pipeline that is through the kind of a heavily vegetated area, really susceptible to wildfires and issues like that. It's very difficult to maintain, and the water supply goes through a very small pipeline. I think there's like 30 gallons per minute that pumps to our Sheep Ranch tank. So this plant, if there's any issues in the Sheep Ranch, it takes a very long time to refill the tank. And the supply is through a canyon that's very difficult to maintain.
Kevin, what about the backup tank that we put in? The county
Yes,
put
we
in?
have a backup tank that's for fire suppression. So that tank is operable now. And actually the first day that we put it up, it was used for a fire in that area. So yes, it's been used several times since then. It's treated water right now. So it diverts. There's a three-way valve that we installed to maintain the water supply in that tank. There's a fire hydrant that's dedicated to that tank.
We've got it filled with treated water.
Well,
It's good water.
Talked about, we can push raw water into it, get it in there more quickly. Quickly is a relative term in Sheep Ranch because the feed line is 3 inches and
Right.
and it goes actually through a 1-inch good old fashioned residential meter when it leaves. An original pressure vessel is the raw water pump station for Sheep Ranch. So not necessarily the correct application for the infrastructure that we have there. That's 25 years old. But so when it hits that treatment facility, it goes to a 3-way valve. We can fill the raw tank with raw water, purple pipe water, and then we can treat the rest and push it into the treated water tank.
And if
So
the treated goes down, then we could use the backup.
that's
treated,
correct.
put it
That's
in.
right.
We got good reserves.
yeah, so we're looking at possibly changing the point of diversion for this so that we don't have to rely on that deteriorating steel pipeline that you can't get to without walking a couple miles down the road through a path.
It's a long trail.
Yeah, it's a long trail. And so that's kind of what we got in the Abbott's Pass Sheep Ranch area. You see there's some variances there. We're looking at obviously any kind of grant funding we can secure, but we've tried to get grant funding for some of these projects and they're just really challenging. So Jenny Lind and Wallace, the A to B transmission pipeline is almost done. That's just the remaining work that we have left on that project. So that'd be finishing paving and finishing the service lines. They made the connection to A-Tank last night, so that was really exciting. A-Tank replacement. This is one of the most critical tanks in the whole Jenny Lind system. It's old, it has a lot of issues. They've welded on the roof multiple times, and this tank is getting to the point where it just needs to be replaced with a tank that's past its useful life, it's in poor condition, and we're looking at options for that. The Jenny Lind raw water intake. This is a project that we've approached the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for funding through the 219 process. We've been doing a lot of work with them. The $5 million represents our 25% share. So it's a $15 to $20 million project to relocate the raw water intake from underneath the Calaveras River and underneath the gravel pack into New Hogan Reservoir.
Will we need to do that if we get the straw in Hogan?
What was that?
The straw that we want to put in Hogan, will that
Yeah,
solve
that's
that?
this project.
Replace that.
How to replace
But
that?
in the summer of 2019, we lost permeability through that gravel pack. We actually couldn't, for a brief moment in time there, we couldn't bring enough water through the gravel pack into the intake structure to meet demand.
Right.
And so that kind of woke us all up as to this, the condition of that intake structure, the gravel pack. It's, when you see increased discharge flows for whatever reason, that gravel pack would shift all of it. So if you can imagine all of those pipes, I'm not sure if you're aware, there's laterals under the gravel of the river that convey water to a collector that's about 30 feet underground. And so that river water basically backfills any human access into that collector area for maintenance for the equipment. And it's been under there since the 90s. And so the valves that are in that area, some of them have failed due to corrosion because they're underwater all the time. And so our ability to isolate sections of that gravel pack in the river is gone. And so our concern is as we go to clean that, because periodically over time, that intake structure plugs up. And so we have approval through California Fish and Wildlife in the fall to backflush it. Backflushing requires us to operate those valves and to redirect water from basically we're pulling it out of the river, pushing it back through a line. And so our concern is if that equipment fails, we would have reduced capacity immediately. And so kind of contemplating all of that, Kevin and his team worked to get with the Corps to develop a project that basically gets us out of the river's gravel pack and
And that's what this is.
Yes, right.
Okay, I was conflating two projects. My bad.
Yeah, we get high flows through there that can wash the gravel pack off. There's all kinds of issues there with
I
it.
think the straw is a great idea.
What's that?
I think the straw is a great idea.
Again, how long would that, how far away, how long would that pipe be?
It's about a mile and a half. So it'd be,
Yeah. Long.
yeah, there's a lot of environmental challenges and cultural issues with maintaining the system we have there now. It makes it nearly impossible to do anything in the river anymore.
Kevin, I have a question. On this, what Jack is referring to as a straw, could that pipe conceivably function like a siphon? Rather than pumping it out of the reservoir, if you plugged it off at the bottom end, filled the pipe one time, it would.
Yeah,
Romans did that pretty effectively. So.
Yeah, we've explored trying to connect into, we have the tap for the hydroelectric on the bottom of, the head from the reservoir could push water through the pipeline. We've been digging into, there's a lot of challenges with that. So I think the project at this point would be a pump similar to what we have at Lake Tolek in New Hogan. But yes, we're looking at possible ways to use hydraulics and not eliminate the pump station, but it's challenging.
I was pushing for that connection to the water distribution valve at the bottom of the dam months ago, but I was thinking more recently that if the pipeline is going to be a 20-inch pipeline, and have you ever put those siphon pipes in an irrigation system and hit it a couple of times and the water continues to flow? So what? Wrong with that?
I mean, it would, yeah, you'd pump up and it would break.
You don't need to
fall
pump.
down. So
You don't need to pump it up.
Kevin's talked about that.
It could save us money on electrical down the
Yeah,
road and maintenance.
Right. You have them.
Take Russ with you, Dan.
Yeah.
And don't forget
Right.
about the inline low head hydro to run the plant. So
Yeah.
and then so that was the raw water intake, and the next one is the Jalen water treatment plant filter rehab. So this filter number 6, it's the remaining filter that hasn't been rehabbed yet at the plant. We've completed the rehab of the other ones. This one's, I think, a little bit smaller than some of the other ones. Then B tank replacement. This is the other tank in Jalen. Actually, we have 5 tanks that need to be rehabbed in Jalen, but we have 2 on this, and then we're looking at the 3 more being in the 5 to 10 year range. We'll make sure we get these replaced or rehab before we have major issues. In the Wallace water supply reliability, we have the design of this in the 5-year. The construction would be further out, but that's looking at the groundwater wells over there. We continue to lose depth on those as time goes on, and we have manganese and other issues in West and Wallace that are difficult to deal with. So we're looking at, this would either be a 3rd well, or potentially been talking to East Bay Mud about potential surface water. So that's what this project is for, is to kind of develop, and we have antiquated controls at the treatment plant there. That's another item that needs to be repaired.
I wanted to add something to be mindful of when Kevin talks about manganese issues, that the state is considering a reduction in the lowering or tightening the level of compliance requirement for manganese. So it's 0.5 parts per billion, 0.05 milligrams per liter parts per million currently. I'm going to bring it down to 0.02. And so we have manganese, as you all know, naturally occurring in Lake Tolek and in Hogan and in the wells in Wallace. So we just need to be mindful of that in the future and prepare for that with the treatment facilities, because currently it's what's called a secondary maximum. There's a secondary requirement associated with manganese. It's an aesthetic thing. So it's not associated with public health and safety, but the state is considering it, making it a primary constituent because it does. So it's so impactful to the aesthetic side of the water supply. And it inhibits folks' confidence in the water supply. And so if that's the case, then, you know, if we have an exceedance, then we end up like we did up on Ebbets Pass relative to disinfection byproducts when you had locational running annual averages of compliance at different sample stations. You have one exceedance for one quarter, like we did on the pass, it could take us 5 to 6 years to return to. So then when your system then gets put into this bucket of quote unquote failing water system, and so then when you're pulled up on any, you know, Division of Drinking Water or State Water Resources Control Board website, and they look at all the failing water systems in California, yours is highlighted. But it could be related to one average exceedance for one sample site in one quarter 4 years ago. So that's really has a massive impact on your customers' perception of the water.
And then over in West Point, we have the West Point drought water supply. So this is enlarging our Bummerville Reservoir from 50 acre feet to 150 acre feet. That would supply the West Point community during drought conditions and limit our reliance on the Middle Fork pump station. And it is grant funded 90%. And then we're looking at, there's some matching money that we could potentially get from the DSOD that recently came out. So we're exploring that options for our match.
Before we go on, and I'm sure the engineering committee's gone through all this, but on the sheep ranch tanks, because of the strategic location of those tanks or fire suppression historically in this county, maybe CAL FIRE wants to help us out. And they've been great partners, and that's a key location for them.
Yeah, some of the historic stuff they wouldn't supply, or they wouldn't pay for water system improvements. That's kind of been their stance. They'll pay for like masticating and forest health type stuff, but they've been reluctant to fund any like hydrant projects that supply water to hydrants.
It's a gap in the funding sources that the mountain counties agencies have identified and continue to advocate for, because whether it's state water, the state revolving fund or CAL FIRE funds or FEMA funds, none of them will fund water system expansion for fire suppression infrastructure. And that's a challenge for those of us.
Maybe they've got grant, they can masticate that path for us.
Yeah.
We could find our pipes.
I want to highlight too that Kelly brought this up. This is something that we talked about as a team, how critical that top of that hill is, fire protection.
2 historic major fires are stopped right there.
So if there's any more questions on the water, I can move on to sewer.
I have one question. You mentioned under the Copper Cove bracket there that Lake Telic Intertie project is kind of joined at the hip with the O'Burns Ferry tank. Will that be bid at the same time?
No, although Burns Ferry tank would come later. So this pipeline eliminates the reliance on the underwater crossing that's susceptible to lots of issues. This would take the water down at Burns Ferry, right, and come in at or by Connor Estates. So it could supply everybody on that side. So the benefit of having a tank on that side, you could take sections of that pipe out of service without having to take basically all of Copperopolis out of water to do repairs on the line. And also it would reduce any issues with like pressure spikes, anything like that, or it would balance the supply. So the PRVs wouldn't have to constantly open and shut. We could just have a balanced system that would be like the line coming out of C tank could fill the tank, and then everybody else in that area would just be fed by gravity from the tank. It's a little bit better way for the whole system to run, but it's not necessarily required for the initial project.
Well, I imagine I'm pretty familiar with the elevation changes along the road. And unless you go to the east side of Burnsbury Road with that tank, you're not going to have differential elevation for creating a hydrostatic pressure. So are you looking for property to put that on the east side of the road?
Yeah, we actually own a piece of property above the IGA up on the hill there. I don't know if that was supposed to be a tank site at some point, but it's basically a property that's would be a good location for the tank. So that could be a potential site. Just getting the easements to take a pipe up to that site. We don't have that at this point, but I don't see why we couldn't get that.
I was visualizing coming down farther toward the bridge for the tank, but if you've got a tank property there that warrants looking into. Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Wastewater. So this is we got the Arnold secondary clarifier project that's ongoing. I think we have our first pour of the digester tomorrow, so that's exciting, or on Friday. And then the Arnold lift station 2 and 3, these are extremely deteriorated lift stations that we have in Arnold that lift station 2 takes all the flows from basically the Big Trees Market up the hill, and it's right on a creek. And we've had to replace I think the lid and a few other things here recently, and it's just, there's no controls on it.
I want to highlight something with wastewater projects. As you guys all can imagine, the conditions within which they live are extreme. And so the off-gassing from waste product in the lift station increases corrosion significantly. Like with lift station 3 and lift station 2 in copper, the steel on the inside of the tank, if you imagine it's a steel box or a steel cylinder, if you will, they delaminate in sections. So our mechanics welding and trying to coat. So collections will go around and routinely pull all the pumps and suck out any of the grit that lives on the bottom of the lift station that can't get out. And then we try to assess that, but we're also working with equipment that has to operate. And so we try to pick periods of load. And so keeping these facilities in operation has proved very artful. We've got some really talented folks out there. They do need to be replaced, particularly. I mean, so a lot of, like, when Kevin goes down the list, one of the things I'd like to highlight is a lot of these are not priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. They're all priority 1s, just about diving into that next level of analysis. Okay, if they're both priority 1s, how many folks or customers does this issue serve as opposed to this issue? Is there a regulatory compliance issue? Is there a catastrophic failure issue? And so that's kind of what plays into the work that his team does to prioritize the projects. But those two, yes, we've had mechanics re-welding the roofs and the hatches on lift station 2, and then lift station 3 is single phase power. So for the longest time, we had single phase sewer pumps, and they're not very good at chopping up sewer debris. And depending on what area of a system you're in, you see different debris in the sewer. It could be blue latex gloves. It could be rags. It could be Swiffers. So we would have to pull the pumps at lift station 3, I would say every month, pull this debris out of the bottom of those pumps before we could find a step up transformer to bring that single phase up to 3 phase, put in chopper pumps. And so the conditions of the lift station suffer more when we have debris that we struggle to get out of there. So they're definite priorities for us.
And the wet wells are definitely undersized for what, there's a lot of pump starts and stops. It wears the pumps out a lot quicker. And we're actually doing INI study in that area right now. So we're getting the accurate flows that we have coming in, the wintertime flows. Get those properly sized. The Sequoia Woods Mountain Retreat Force Main. So this is to address the failing leach fields that we have at the Sequoia Woods wastewater treatment plant. It's a separate permitted facility within the Arnold area. And so we were looking at, as part of a master planning effort, constructing a force main between the Sequoia Woods and our Arnold wastewater treatment plant system, collection system. And there's because these are two separate permitted facilities, we're looking at potentially applying for a consolidation grant, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Otherwise, the other option is to try to replace the leach field, except we don't have any more real estate there. We already have 2 leach fields that we switch in between on a weekly basis to prevent any overflows. The Forest Meadows effluent pump station spray field, this is to address the issues at Forest Meadows with the spray fields. And then in Copper Cove, we have the staff and tertiary. Our staff unit showed up today on site, Copperopolis, so that's exciting. And so our construction crews will be working to get that installed here soon. This is part of our in-kind contributions to the Army Corps project. The upper cross country and lower cross country force main projects. This is a bottleneck in our system in Copperopolis. They're at capacity or probably over capacity. They have very high velocities in these pipelines that are deteriorating the pipeline quickly. So this is a cross country line that needs to be replaced with a larger pipeline. And then Copper Cove Lift Station 16-17 rehab. We just got the design in the next 5 years, and then from 5 year to 10 year, we got the construction. We're kind of looking at construction those periods. But these are the dry can lift stations. Wrong direction. So this is dry can lift stations that are right along Lake Toluc. They're subjected to overflows that can get into Lake Toluc. Then La Cantena Biolac clarifier. So this is our project for our La Cantena wastewater treatment plant. So this is the one that we're looking for a grant opportunity working with Valley Springs. This is a consolidation grant with them to try to bring this money in for this project because it's very expensive. It was on the CIP before the last rate study and was pushed out into this rate study. And we've completed the design of both Huckleberry and La Cantena, with the exception of a couple little items on La Cantena that we're trying to refine. So we're working on towards that process, but we need to look at how we're going to get this project funded, because we can't take the flows that are coming in from the new developments that are on track to go into La Cantena, and we can't even keep up with the flows we have now. The pipeline going to Lower Pond, we've had some issues with surcharging because we can't get enough water to Lower Pond. We're having to put it in the emergency storage pond in the Upper Pond. And then the Biolac system's failing. It's aged, single train system. We can't maintain it, and it's basically a disaster. And so we're trying to figure out how to make this system run until we can get it replaced with a larger system.
What are the chances of a grant?
I think we're spending a lot of time and energy trying to get the best grant application we can get together. I think the funding for consolidations projects has been some of the only unused grant funding in the state of California in the last few years. So there's a pot of money out there. There's Prop 4 money coming in if we can get our application in quick enough. The VSPUD board already approved us to submit the grant. Just need to work on how that's financial issues is going to work during that. So because they're a disadvantaged community, they are eligible for 100% grant funding on this project. And I think it's up to $75,000 per connection that you can get on a grant. So it's a really good opportunity for them to contribute to this project, a long-term project in the area. So I think we have a really good project because it checks all the priorities that the water board's looking for on funding these grants. So we've actually come up with how we're going to interconnect with them. We got all the piping plans done. We need their average dry weather flow versus the wet weather flows, they're like 10 times. So they have a lot of I&I problems. So in order for us to take their flows, we're going to have to basically reline their entire system, or we put ourselves in a bad position where our new plant can't even take their flows. There's a lot of complications on that, but we think we got a good partner in that project. So I think we're going to meet with them here soon.
Into one.
Yes, it's really bad. So I think it's an old clay pipe that's just, so without relining it and doing all the manholes, I wouldn't recommend taking their flows.
Well, that's the only way that they'll, I mean, well, they, without this grant, they can.
Yeah, and their treatment plant is in bad condition. It's full of sludge. I mean, they got $1
Well,
million.
it's outdated too. It's only, secondary. It's not, I mean, I'm surprised that they haven't been required to go to a tertiary plant anyway. Another thing that they wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's just a matter of working with them to try to make this happen.
Thankfully, they're accepted to the program, so that's great. The credit.
I think it's definitely a win-win. The collection system INI improvements, we're doing INI studies in Arnold. There's some areas that we've identified that could potentially get relined that could save us some flows. Because right now we're over our general permit conditions at Arnold. And they're coming out with a new general permit that allows you to go beyond those permit conditions, but we routinely exceed our permit conditions. So what we need to do is some INI improvements there to reduce the amount of inflow into the system so we don't get those peaks during the winter months. And then also our lock and tin system has a few areas that need INI improvements that we found during the INI study there. So basically, this doesn't look like the most current one, but okay, right here. So this is kind of the shortfalls without the grants that we've secured. We're at $20 million on water projects over the next 5 years. Obviously, that's only the next 2 years are funded in the current rate study. So the next 3 years, there's likelihood that if we continue the funding levels that we're at, that we'll be able to gain on some of that $20 million. But
Go back one slide. That little gray box to the left and it's on the right on the one before for water, assume successful applications. But what does that mean exactly? It can't mean that it assumes that successful grant applications on every single application.
no, I think that's the lock-in. I think it's mainly lock antenna. We didn't put the $12 million in there for lock antenna.
We haven't got there yet. Okay. Right.
Sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so lock antenna has got a variance of $10 million and $7 million. So to that number that we have there, you have to add $18 million to it. This previous number here. So that's the difference between the 11 million and the 24 million. Doesn't add up quite right, but
what's the purpose of putting that little box on the first two slides that we've been spending? Okay.
The budgets that we've prepared for your edification include the optimistic outlook that we are going to get those grants. We need to revisit that, whether we want to present that as part of the final budget, and we would, look to the board to, how would you like to see it presented?
It's also more longer term outlook. Like I don't think it necessarily impacts spending this coming fiscal year, but it does impact the outlook. Which we always have to keep an eye on how we're setting ourselves up for infrastructure funding going forward.
Which is unrealistic, actually, to assume that we're going to receive all of that. And the other assumption that we have, Jack brought up earlier, that we're going to assume that we're never going to raise rates in the next.
No,
years.
we're not saying that.
Assuming,
right.
But
We're just not. We're not
assuming
any particular level of rate increase. In fact, I would assume we are going to do another rate study at the end of this 5-year rate study. We just didn't want to plug in any projections about what the outcome of that might be. And then with these grants, with the 5-year financial plan, we assumed no grants unless they were in hand, secured. The outlook here, we're optimistic on a few of these grants, and we're going to do everything we can to get them, because if we don't, we're in a real tough spot. So that's why we're just showing that to illustrate it, but it doesn't necessarily affect spending this year.
Yeah, and if we don't secure the grants, we'll have to possibly look at financing options that we
Well,
have.
and to be clear, we're in a tough spot even if we get the grant. I think that's what this is showing. But we also just want to highlight that we're not, where we're assuming grants that aren't yet secured, we just want to make sure we flag that. So we're not.
Those assumptions aren't in this first year's budget.
That's correct. Right.
Yeah, we're not starting any projects that aren't funded long term. So yeah, here's kind of what we didn't put the $18 million in there in the original number. So you add that to it. It's the situation's much more dire. And then we have a lot of projects that we passed up on this 5-year cycle. So like I mentioned earlier, there's 3 tanks in Jangland that are equally poor condition and way past the coatings are way past their design period. So they need to be looked at here really quickly. Copper Cove C tank, which is our main tank in copper, is past its life on its lining. Now that we got the C transmission line, previously we couldn't take one of the 2 tanks out of service because we couldn't get enough water supply there to meet peak hour demand. Now that we got the C transmission line going there, we're able to pump enough water where we could take one of the tanks out of service, rehab it, and then we could rehab the other one. So it gets a lot more flexibility with the project that's being completed now to be able to rehab that tank. Pinebrook tank is another one that serves the Moran area of Arnold. The 1 million gallon tank is due for recoating. Wallace elevated tanks in poor condition. So we're looking at options, either eliminating that, we're putting a new ground tank on there, putting a pressure system, or getting up there and recoating that elevated tank, which is challenging. The Sheep Ranch distribution system, really old system, 1960s, never been touched. Old galvanized pipe, no fire flow in the community, with the exception of the one fire hydrant that's at the tank that was put in conjunction with the county.
That's separate than the raw water line and pump station.
Yeah, so the raw
Talking about
water's
the whole-
getting, so we always want to start at the bottom of the system, get the water up there, and then we'll do the distribution system.
But on that, the limitation on that, that's an 80,000 gallon tank, if I remember correctly, but it's a 1-inch line. Right.
Going into-
If there's
going into
really a
Ridge.
fire up there and they're drawing on that hydrant, we can't refill it. It's 30 gallons a minute. I think we can refill it at 30 gallons a minute.
That's why we got the second tank.
It's one shot.
Right, which is why we got 2 tanks.
Yeah, usually the requirements are to fill in 8 hours, so we're not, but this is such a rural community that sometimes you get some relaxation on that, but, and so we got the second tank at Avery Melmont. So these are our 2 main tanks in Arnold. So they're, we pump out those tanks at 20,000 gallons a minute. And so like 45 minutes, the tank's dry if the pump's running. So these tanks, we need a second tank there. They're originally designed for 2 tanks. The piping underground's all there. But I guess financial constraints when they were originally built, they only built one of the 2 tanks they're supposed to build. So we're doing the hydraulic model right now for Arnold. It's going to show that we got it under capacity right there. So this has been on the books for a long time and it needs to get done. Because right now we have no flexibility to take the existing tank out to maintain it either. Service line replacements, or we have an internal crew that's doing that, but we're probably going to need some CIP projects to kind of keep up with the progress on that. We have a lot of service lines, a lot of water loss issues that need to be taken care of. They're focusing mainly on Copperopolis and Jangland. We also have Arnold, and most of the new lines in West Point have been replaced. So there's a lot of work to be done in those areas still. Fire flow improvements. So we're doing the master plans right now. So there's a lot of PRVs that don't have bypasses. So that means they're small PRVs, a restriction. So there's a project that we'll need to do to put fire flow PRVs in. We might have to look at some of our smaller pump stations on how we're going to get fire flow to these remote areas when we need it. But that's something that's on the radar and is going to be evaluated in our master planning efforts. Calypso Bay waterline relocation. There's basically a water line kind of hanging on the edge of a cliff over there that we put sandbags on top of. So we're trying to, that's one of the projects that we need to, there's a lot of those pipelines in that Calypso Bay area that we're putting these cross-country routes that have a lot of issues. And that's definitely on our radar to get those relocated. And right now we have some just shut off because of the condition they're in right now. Meadowmont distribution and PRV replacement. So we got the line going through the old golf course in Arnold. It has a PRV, it's wetland areas. It's a small line, AC pipeline. It's in poor shape. And the PRV has a lot of issues. So it'd be installing a new cross-country line up to the Arnold 13 or Meadowmont tank that's on Bloom Court. We can't get enough water to that tank the way it's situated right now. So it's definitely a bottleneck in our system. And then the Mill Fork pump station. This project's kind of deferred to see what's happening with the West Point dam enlargement, but it's definitely still a critical piece in our infrastructure in the event that we're not getting enough water out of that supply. I thought we took this out, but this is the projects that are in our just in the design phase in this 5-year. We don't have money for the construction of it, but 6 Mile of Vallecito is definitely critical. This is a 2-inch line that goes down from 6 Mile to Angels Camp along the creek. Has multiple issues with in the past. There's issues with discharging water into the raw sewage into the Angels Creek. So it's important that that line gets some attention, and that could be done by rerouting it to Vallecito. And the Copper Cove lift stations 16 and 17, we talked about those earlier. Those aren't, the construction funds are in there, just the design. And then wastewater projects, we got a sewer line relocation on Highway 4. It's a bottleneck in our sewer system. Cross-country force main, we talked about lower earlier. Pueblo Trail, it's old fiberglass manholes, gravity main that's completely deteriorated, needs to be replaced. Moccasin lift station, this is along Little John. There's a really old lift station. You can see it from Little John when you drive by. But it's got pretty small horsepower because it just pumps across the road and down dirt. But it definitely needs repair. Copper Hills 2 in the community we noticed as the circles on Feather Drive. That's got a lot of issues.
An interesting one is, so you look at lift stations, 42 in there also. So these are in Connor Estates. Connor Estates main lift station provides electrical power on the airway of a condominium. So if we ever have to work there, we will have to potentially dismantle the stairway.
How do we get our lift station under their stairway?
That's an excellent question. Love to see how that all transpired, but we would have to basically dismantle some landscaping, get over. And so really
Call retirees and ask them what they're thinking.
Yeah, so as we look at some of these things, really the kind of the thought process is, okay, there's got to be a better way. But that involves planning and design. Some of these projects highlight that, so they're not necessarily within the CIP, but they are areas that all of a sudden, if we get bit and everyone is trying to understand how we got bit and why wasn't this on the CIP, because it requires planning, we need to circle the wagons and come up with a design to facilitate.
Is that the 42 you were looking for?
Yeah, the relocation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then that one is tied to those others. So one other, operationally, you think about, okay, what if we don't have energy to 42 or to 41 from 40? Well, guess what? The energy is coming from 40. It's about, 1,000 yards away. So do we then call in for a new power pole to be set and a drop? Do that, trenching that? So these are the kinds of things that as we take away the kind of the higher profile, obvious projects, that we start to dive into these things that are somewhat unique, but are definitely going to be really challenging if we don't mitigate ahead of time.
And we have a number of old electrical panels that have arc flash issues, so they need to be, it's a worker safety item and also kind of maintenance item that we need to correct a lot of those panels.
Is that, Kevin, if I could ask, I mean, arc flash that kills people.
Yeah,
Is
we've
it
had,
falling under life safety. I mean,
yeah,
we've now
this is,
identified a risk to our employees.
so right now we're talking about putting warning labels on these. That's something we're working on actively. And then, but as far as the Arnold wastewater has bad arc flash issues there, we're actually relocating into a new building as part of that project. So there's ongoing efforts. The Larkspur pump station that's on our CIP, that's the arc flash issues that we talked about, electrical panels. So we're identifying the worst case scenarios and taking care of those. But as far as arc flash in general, there's a lot of outdated electrical equipment that needs the money. Yeah, it is definitely.
I mean, a lot of the stuff was installed before the modern arc flash standards and severity of the risk was realized. And so you have these issues in a lot of places. So what Kevin's talking about is whenever we do an infrastructure project, if there's an arc flash issue there, we address it as a part of that project to make sure we're trying to make progress. But there are a lot of other issues where there are safety issues. It's a real concern, and it's an expensive problem to fix.
There's a death benefit. You gotta,
Right.
Yeah, a lot of that goes to training right at this point, and we're trying to improve our situation as best as we can.
Are any of these arc flash issues we're talking about in a confined area below ground? There were
Potentially.
several of those
Right.
years ago that I thought we had taken care of all of that.
Not all. We definitely took care of some of those. Yeah, the wet can, dry can issue. Just recently, Kevin's team just recently finished some of those up at the lift station rehabilitation projects in Copper. But what Michael highlighted is exactly what we're experiencing now. And so Kevin talked about safety. Michael talked about safety. Director Garamendi. And so we have licensed electricians. They're the ones that open those panels. Nobody else. And so what this is highlighting is exactly what Michael said, is we do need to do an audit of those other facilities and understand what the cost is going to be to bring that system current. If we don't have a plan to replace X lift station or pump station, because there are other priorities, what about the risk relative to arc flash? Kind of what that is.
And then solids handling facility. So long term, we need a place to take our solids and let them dry. So we've talked about that in the past, but there hasn't been a good facility location yet. So that's on the radar. Wet sludge costs a lot more to haul off than dry sludge. So it'd be nice to have. And then we've kind of talked about, there's opportunities for the biochar facilities that would take our sludge, but if those don't come along, we'll have to have a facility where we can dry our sludge. And then Vallecito wastewater treatment plant improvements. There's some EQ issues there with flows coming in that we can't handle through our filters. And other issues there to improve that facility with the controls and possibly another filter and rehabbing the existing filters that are deteriorating. Lift station elimination. So we're looking at, in Copperopolis, we have a number of lift stations. They only have a dozen or less people on lift stations. So converting those people all to a system where they can pump into the main instead of having to, and a lot of them already have pumps. So it'd just be a matter of retrofitting these houses with a new pump that's capable of pushing to the force main without having anything coming back at them. That'd be a cost-effective way for us to eliminate some of these lift stations that we have. And then lock and tenant spray fields is another project that could be potentially done in-house.
Pumps at the houses belong to us or them?
They would belong to them, so we would give and the existing ones belong to them, the grinder pumps. We have specifications that they have to meet for those pumps. So the project would be, they'd probably have like not a septic tank, but a tank underneath their house that pumps up to our system and a grinder pump. So these would be like a self-contained, eliminate the tank, a lot cleaner. They come with a service plan, that type of stuff, but they could use their existing electrical service, be outfitted with their like E1 brand pumps that pump directly into a pressurized system instead of right now they pump usually into gravity that flows down. So we'd put a new line in the road and they'd all pump into a common header and then they would pump out. So it wouldn't cost the the property owning any more money. It would just, they would be responsible for electricity that they're already paying for anyway.
But some of these are going to be important in a fashion. They're going to cost us more later. If you were to just pull a number out of the air for local water and waste critical projects, what are we looking at? $30 million?
Well, it's difficult to say at this point, but yeah, it would probably be, the next 5 years would probably be equal to the 5 years we have now. And there's also cost escalations as time goes on. That's one thing I was going to bring up with the cost escalations we've seen in the last few years have been astronomical, especially in the construction. We saw a lot during COVID, and then even in 2022, at the tail end of COVID, we've seen, 10% plus cost increases on construction projects. So it's, the sooner you can do them, the better off you are. But obviously we can't do everything. So these just kind of highlight that we have a lot of other projects that the 5-year CIP we have right now is what we picked as the most critical within the CCWD. We have several meetings, with operations staff, kind of identifying these risks that we talked about, prioritizing them for failure and other items. But yeah, prioritizing the project in the future is definitely critical. Obviously, we don't want to do anything that doesn't have to be done.
Don't get grants.
Some of the projects you can't.
Yeah, not necessarily. It depends on the project. We have some projects where if we aren't successful in securing grant funds and the project isn't absolutely critical, that project gets pushed out. Like the West Point Reservoir is one that would be really great for that water system if we get it. But if we don't get a grant, we're not gonna put up the 100% cost of that project.
12 million?
La Contenta has to get done. One way or another, we have to figure out a way to pay for that project.
Yeah, that project's been on the books for a long time. It keeps getting pushed back because of the cost.
And I think an important thing we were discussing earlier about that project is we're spending money now on minor repairs to keep it going as long as we can. So that's
Band-aids, yeah.
Band-aids. And so we're going to keep those costs as low as we can, but at the same time, extend the life of the plant to the extent possible until we can do the.
And so, yeah, the ongoing funding challenge we just talked about, aging infrastructure, inflationary pressures. We saw that a lot. And I think some of those inflationary pressures came after the last rate increase. So we continue to see, we made a lot of investments, but the construction costs keep going up too, more so than historical amounts. Regulatory requirements are just very burdensome, and we get new regulations every year. Debt service coverage is something that we definitely have to maintain. The opportunity to keep up and take more debt on in the future is important too, so we can make sure our numbers are where they need to be able to get more debt in the future. Because ideally, the people that, when we take on debt, the people that are using that infrastructure are the ones paying for it. If you pay go, then the existing customers pay. If you take it over time, then the people that are benefiting from that infrastructure are paying for it. And then the unfunded reserves, but I'll turn this over to Kelly. That was probably the first slide.
Two more questions. I've got two more. Well, one's for Kelly, actually, but another question I have. Look back over, say, the last 5 or 10 years, how often have we had a $1 million event that we couldn't plan for? I mean, is it likely that we'll have something in the next 5 years as well? A blowout?
So nice that you bring that up. Like there's definitely some of our neighboring industry agencies have had tanks TUD's had a number of tanks that just collapsed on them, and we've had the Lawrenceburg tank that we took down. We were probably days away from collapsing. The roof rafters were laying on the bottom of the tank. We took it apart.
Gone, yeah.
Sawmills, tanks gone. The Lake Tolek Intertie project, we have basically a pipeline laying on the bottom of Lake Tolek that comes down a steep ravine, goes across the lake, comes to the other side. And so if there's an issue with that pipeline, you're talking millions and millions of dollars to fix it.
We have had sewer spills in that time frame, and the fact that we were not fined to what we could have been fined. So, you could be fined $10,000 per gallon of sewage spilled, and so in some of these cases, spilled into Lake Tulloch. So when you report this, you're at the mercy of the state as whether or not you get a bill for the spill. So we spilled into Lake Tulloch, and we had a sewer spill off of the 6 Mile pipeline. Incidentally, we pay the city of Angels Camp $6,000+ a month to convey that sewage from 6 Mile over to their treatment facility, and that spilled into the creek right before it's received by Angels. So we were like so close, but so that line, like Kevin talked about, is placement or redirection to Vallecito. There have been issues, not necessarily $1 million issues, but expensive.
So Kelly, before we go back into budget, we've been 2 hours. I'm gonna let this board stretch their legs and hit the restroom. We're gonna take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 3:15. the Calaveras County Water District Board meeting. Kelly, you are on.
All right, we will continue with our budget. The slide that you see on your screen right now is the district-wide overview of the preliminary budget, showing water, wastewater, and hydropower. The revenue sources are projected at approximately 42.2 million, which is an increase of about 2.2 million over the current year. Operating revenue increases are primarily driven by proposed water and wastewater rate adjustments that are scheduled to go into effect in July. Non-operating revenues increase due to investment earnings, grants, and other outside funding sources. Total uses are projected at 40.9 million, which is an increase of about 1.9 over the prior year. Salaries and benefit increases primarily due to wage staffing needs to maintain reliable operations and increases to retirement costs. The transfers to capital projects has increased, reflecting the district's continued investment in infrastructure replacement and system reliability. The debt service coverage is healthy at 1.69 for water and 2.73 for wastewater, which is a 2.23 overall. Overall, this budget balances operational reliability, infrastructure investment, and reserve funding, along with long-term financial sustainability. As I go through those slides, please feel free to stop me and ask any questions. We'll do our best to answer you. Kamiko is on the line, and I believe that Habib from IB is also on the line. So if you have any questions as we move through. Oh, he dropped off? Okay. Never mind on that one. Next slide summarizes the 26-27 water enterprise budget. Total sources are approximately 27.7 million. Operating revenues increased by approximately 5.8%, primarily reflecting the water rate adjustment. Non-operating revenues increased due to grant funding and investment earnings. Total use increased modestly to approximately 27.4 million over the 26.6 million for 25-26. Services and supplies have decreased slightly as staff continues efforts to control operating costs. Transfers to capital projects have increased by 38.2%, supporting critical infrastructure replacement and system improvements. I think that's about all on that one. Moving on to water budget projections. The schedule provides a multi-year projection for the water fund through fiscal year 30-31. Operating revenues gradually increase over the forecast period and reflect planned rate adjustments and stable customer demand. Personnel and operating costs continue to rise due to inflation, retirement obligations, and infrastructure maintenance needs. Debt service gradually declines over time as existing obligations are paid down. Transfers to capital projects remain a major priority throughout the forecast period, and the water fund shows positive operating performance in the near term. Beginning in 28-29, projections show increasing financial pressure as expenditures grow faster than revenues. The debt service coverage remains above minimum requirements throughout the projection period, but declines over time. By fiscal year 30-31, it is below the 1.25 target.
Kelly, if I could just add the asterisk again, that's
Yes.
because we have no increases at that. We continue to increase our expenses like this.
Correct. Yes, I agree. Asterisk applied. All righty. So this slide summarizes the 26-27 wastewater budget. The sources are projected at approximately 12.3 million, increasing about 5.1% over 25-26. Operating revenues increased primarily due to proposed water rate adjustments. The non-operating revenues increased due to investment earnings and other outside funding sources. And then on the expense side, the total uses increase approximately 4% over the prior year. Services and supplies decrease as staff continues efforts to manage discretionary spending. Transfers to capital projects increase to support wastewater infrastructure improvements and reliability. And then there's a transfer to reserves is included as required in our debt covenants. The wastewater fund is projected to have a positive net addition to operations of approximately $977,000. The wastewater budget projections. This schedule provides the long-term outlook for the wastewater enterprise through 2030-31. The operating revenues increase gradually over the forecasted period and assume stable customer demand, same as the water fund. Personnel, maintenance, and operating costs continue to increase, same reasons. The debt service peaks in 26-27 and then gradually declines as debt is repaid. Transfers to the capital projects remain a long-term major priority for us, and the debt service coverage ratio remains above minimum financing requirements. These projections demonstrate, again, the long-term financial stability and continued investment in critical wastewater projects. Last, we've got the hydropower operating budget. Don't forget hydropower. This slide summarizes this budget. The total hydropower sources are projected at 2.1 million. Revenues consist of non-operating revenue and internal transfers. Services and supplies have increased due to the support needed for the relicensing efforts. Salaries and benefits have decreased due to staffing allocation adjustments. And the hydropower budget is projected to break even while maintaining operational reliability to make sure that we can keep bringing in the revenue, sending out the expenses in the same. I want to say something that is meaningful on this budget. It's really critical. We need to start thinking about the hydropower budget moving forward. There's going to be some big things happening. This year doesn't reflect that, but moving forward, we've got a lot going on with this budget unit. So I just want to prompt you for that moving forward. We're able to transfer in some money from reserve to make that budget whole. So moving forward, that's going to be.
And we're going, and Kelly, we discussed trying to break out that hydro, especially with relicensing. So it's
Yes.
transparent.
Yes, absolutely. Moving into.
Sorry, so
Yes.
services and supplies of 1.2 million. Why is that figure so high?
So there's going, and Andrew's here.
For hydro,
we're going to
yeah,
have
those are relicensing costs.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Relicensing costs. So the cost of the work that we're doing on relicensing is increasing year over year. And next year will be an increase
Legal
over this year,
fees.
and the year after that will be a huge increase. We're working on the financing plan for that, but it will be reflected in this hydro fund.
If we talked about this in finance committee a bit, and what we're talking about doing is, because this funds for relicensing are in several different pots. It makes it a little hard to account. So we're talking about, after this budget, developing a way that we can keep that money in a place where we can see it, know how we're spending on it. We're pulling it from resources at least.
Understood.
Because it's not transparent.
All right, this slide summarizes operating expenditures by department for the next fiscal year. The operating expenditures are projected at approximately 33 million, which is a slight decrease from the current year budget. Salaries and benefits are totaling 14.9 million. Services and supplies at 12.3, capital outlay at 1.4, debt services at approximately 4.4 million. Utilities department remains the largest department. Pretty self-explanatory. Engineering continues to support capital projects, grants, and regulatory coordination. Overall, the expenditure plan focuses on the operational reliability and infrastructure investment. Moving on to payroll budget. This slide provides a detailed breakdown of the payroll expenditures supporting 76 full-time equivalent positions. Salaries and benefits are budgeted at approximately 14.9 million. Utilities accounts for the largest staffing with 51 FTEs. Salaries and wages are 9.3 million and benefits are 5.6 million. That makes up the 14.9. Let's see. Benefit costs include retirement contributions, healthcare, CTO payouts, and CalPERS unfunded liability payments. CalPERS unfunded liability costs total approximately $1 million district-wide, and that's gone up since the prior year as well.
I think it's just important to point out here for full transparency. So we have, this doesn't represent an increase in full-time employees over this year, but that's partly because we currently have a limited term distribution worker that was brought on over the last 2 years to assist our Jenny Lind distribution crew during construction and the A to B pipeline. We've had some other personnel changes in that area, and we know that we're really short-staffed when it comes to distribution workers. So part of the proposal in this budget is to make that. So it doesn't represent an increase over this fiscal year, but it converts that employee from a limited term position. Just want to make sure we're transparent about that here. Other than that, we're not proposing to add any new employees. Definitely have some areas where
Moving on to capital outlay budget. This schedule outlines approximately 1.4 million in planned capital outlay investments. Focuses on equipment replacement, emergency preparedness, infrastructure support. Largest component is the district's vehicle lease to own program. We're proposing to add one more vehicle to that lease to own program, so that's broken out as a separate vehicle. Let's see, we've got emergency preparedness projects include the trailer mounted generators and telemetry upgrades. Wastewater improvements include the SCADA replacement, UV system upgrades, and facility monitoring equipment. Push cameras, security cameras, support preventive maintenance and operational monitoring. The boardroom audio system refresh would improve meeting accessibility and functionality. Staff is working on the scope of this project and will be submitting a revised cost for the board's consideration at adopted budget. So this is broken out into two parts. The water is asking for about $678,000 with wastewater at $719,000. I don't know if Damon has any comments, but we do have our next slide, which is, these were the rest of the asks that were in the original request that came from staff, excuse me, from management. So I don't know.
Yeah, really any questions from the board related to what's on the list? As you can see, what didn't make it on the list, the looming vac truck, the vac truck that we have on Ebbs Pass is 2013 vintage. So we will need to think about that when it comes to emissions compliance here in the future. And as you all know, those are really, really beneficial tools.
It's really expensive.
They're really expensive, yes.
Is that something we have to purchase by 27?
No. So, well, there's a couple different options. Vac trucks are currently single engine vac trucks are included in the list of exemption requests we can get. So we should be able to be okay in requesting a diesel powered when 2030 hits. Dual motors, that's not the case, but we would walk into the call, so to speak.
So the dual motor would be to power the suction function or something?
Correct. Yep.
Right. Moving on to debt service. The debt service is budgeted at approximately 4.4 million. Major obligations include the USDA loans, water and sewer CIP, and the PERS unfunded liability loan. Several older obligations have now been completed, helping reduce future debt obligations. And you'll see we've got a column there that says what year we took out the loan and what year the loan should be repaid in. Water fund balances. This schedule provides the water fund balances through June 30th, 2027. Total water fund balances decreased from approximately 33.1 million to approximately 23.3, and the reduction is due to the planned capital investments and infrastructure spending. Operating fund balances improve modestly, supporting operational stability and liquidity. We have a proposed reserve adjustment, and that's what the notation is for. Moving, we've got the special projects, which is line 10, moving funds from that reserve into the emergency reserve. It's a proposal that we're looking at, and we're hoping to flush that out a little bit more as we move through this process and bringing back the reserve policies to the board. I feel like this is a prudent step to do. If the board like that to happen, we can do that as part of the final budget. If not, we can absolutely reverse that and keep the funds where they are and wait until we actually go back in and work on the reserves. So I'll leave that to you all to let me know what you'd like to see.
Sorry, but aren't those reserve balances really critical for how the overall finances of special districts by outside powers that be?
Absolutely. So we're not reducing the amount of the reserves. We are just going to be shifting them from the special projects, which is the director driven projects. They're at your discretion, essentially, taking those funds out of that reserve and moving them into the emergency reserve. It's the same amount of money. It's just kind of shifting it from one to the other. So
Making that money work versus sitting at all our CIP, our special projects to the five of us. So just sort of sitting there?
It's historically been used for either infrastructure projects or capital outlay to supplement those budgets. So it does, and it does receive revenue, property tax revenue. So it is it's used frequently for those purposes. So it doesn't. We're going to look at even a broader, more comprehensive restructure of the reserves to make sure that it's where we have some unnecessary funds, we clean it up, keep the funds that we need, and I think it'll help clarify the movement.
Moving on to the wastewater side, similar scenarios. We've got the wastewater fund balance decreases from approximately 18.4 to 12. As we deliver projects, those funds will be drawn down. The operating wastewater fund improves from a negative balance to a projected balance of approximately $725,000 by the end of next fiscal year. There's approximately 8.9 million planned for capital related expenditures, and the reserves will continue to support the wastewater infrastructure replacements. Hydropower, this shows the balances through June 30th, 2027. The balance decreases from approximately 2.8 million to 2.4, and that's that transfer that I was speaking of earlier. The reduction reflects planned operational support and reserve utilization. The district will continue to carefully monitor how hydropower operations to ensure expenditures remain aligned with available resources. So we're not going to enter into any agreements for more than what we have. All right, so that's pretty much the bulk of my presentation. We've got a few slides here that talk a little bit about the impact of what we're proposing to do with the rate, implementing the rates for this year. If you look, the adjustment that would take place in July, would be an increase on the water bill of about $7.50 per month for that water bill, $14.91 bi-monthly. That's assuming 187 gallons of water per day. Sewer bill, this, as you can see, this one has an increase of about $8.85 per month, or $17.69 bi-monthly. That's if we do the 6% increase. And this slide shows the involvement between the water base rate going up from 172.17 every 2 months to 184.23. Water consumption, again, using that 187 gallons per day, would go from $39.45 to $42.30. And sewer would go from $294.99 to $312.68. Moving into our budget assumptions. So this budget assumes that we will be implementing the recommended increases of 7% and 6%, which is scheduled to be effective on July 16th. As we assumed, no funding has been added to the reserves except as required by the debt covenants. And as you can imagine, and you've seen today, we have a strong focus on our critical infrastructure projects. Understanding the customer impacts, the district recognizes that any rate increase affects households and business budgets. Staff has evaluated options to minimize impacts while maintaining safe and reliable services. And the proposed increases are intended to keep pace with rising infrastructure, operational, and regulatory costs. By maintaining reliable water and wastewater systems, we can help avoid larger emergency costs in the future. And I would like to thank you for your time and questions. Please feel free to ask anything else you have. And we recognize that this budget reflects difficult decisions and balances many competing priorities. It balances our operational reliability. It balances trying to keep our aging infrastructure running. The regulatory piece is huge, and we need to really look strongly at our reserves. And most importantly, the impacts to our ratepayers. It can't be said enough. We really have to focus on that. And I think we tried to do that through this budget. Our goal, of course, is to position the district for long-term financial sustainability while continuing to provide safe, reliable water service to our community. And I appreciate your input, and we'll incorporate any comments that you make at this meeting and bring them back for adoption at the June 10th meeting. Anyone has any additional comments or questions, please
Listen to your direction from the
feel
board.
free to ask. I'm out of breath.
Questions or direction?
Breathe deep.
All right.
I just have
Yeah,
a,
it'd be great, it'd be kind of great to have a meeting where we talk about all the stuff that we have that works good.
That idea.
I'd really like that
I
idea.
like that idea. We can do that. We can do
Yeah,
a
nice,
feel,
quick
we can do a
meeting.
feel-good meeting. We'll let Kelly be in charge of it.
I mean, we have a lot of, great projects that we have been able to, accomplish. So I love that idea.
I will say that the budget processes, we're making progress, and I want to compliment the staff and especially the department heads who have really worked hard to maintain their costs, keep things down, work with us. Unless you had a question?
well, just an observation and a comment about that, you've known Kelly Z for a lot longer than we have, but
I've known you a long time, Russ.
Huh?
We worked together before.
I know,
Okay.
but every time that you make a presentation to us, your demeanor and your ease improves, and I think that you're right at the top of your game.
Thank you, sir.
It makes me feel very. I never really felt nervous about this organization, but I feel really good right now. Good for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That means a lot.
So is it just coincidence that, that the proposed increases, match what we set aside for, or did we use that as a goal?
No, it's actually, so if you recall, when the rate schedule was adopted in the public hearing, the years 4 and 5, which we're going into year 4, were cut in half, basically.
I remember, I did it.
Right. And so we're the 5-year financial plan was underfunded. We're still underfunded, especially as far as infrastructure goes, because there have been other areas where costs have come in lower or revenue has come in higher. But overall, when you look at the whole budget, there's still a big gap when it comes to infrastructure funding. So the recommendation is to stick with the adopted rate schedule maximums. Set us up, with infrastructure funding that we need for the next 2 years, but also hopefully set us up for success in the next 5-year rate schedule. We know there's a lot of costs coming.
I had a question. I'm sorry, Jeff.
What's the latest on moving to monthly billing?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we're going to bring back. I think in particular on the sewer side, because that is a much easier billing process for us. So we're looking into how quickly we can make that transition. I think water's, we're getting a lot better, but it's going to take a little bit more time. But sewer, we'll report back here soon.
Well, on that subject, I would like to request that be on one of our June meetings. The next 2 meetings, just to discuss it. I think we've got some answers back from staff, and taken away the items that were going to be studied or looked at from from our January meeting, or maybe it was our February meeting. We're going to be wastewater bill on the tax roll possibility, and then monthly billing for water and wastewater. And so we could have those 3 things in an item in June to discuss at the board level. Just make a formal, you and I have talked about it already, just make a formal request that because it came up right now and not in future agenda items, might as well. But the only thing I wanted to say here is, Kelly, well, I agree with Director Thomas and an outstanding job that you've done. And each time that I don't see him as often, or see you as often as he does in the finance committee. I peek in every once in a while at your meetings, but I'm truly impressed, duly impressed with your presentation and the budget process that you presented today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have good news. We have our business services manager starting on Monday. So hopefully with your request, I can begin to work with her on, turning around some of these wishes that we've had for a while. So yes.
Great to hear.
Yes.
We could maybe talk about it in the second meeting in June.
I
Yeah,
would,
budget
I would, I
first
would, I
meeting.
would definitely prefer the second meeting if that's possible, just because we have to turn around this budget again. So that would be great.
Have any, like, just gone through this whole process? Do you have any, done the detail line by line? Do you have any big picture thoughts after having gone through the size of the board or the board to be thinking about? Or
I wish I had some wise words, some sage words to provide to you at this point. I think right now I'm just on a high of getting through this process. Give me a little bit of time to reflect after we get through it. Kamiko has been so instrumental. You know, I just came in here beginning of February and just kind of am trying to hit the ground running as best I can. And without her support, I don't know if I would have made it as far as I did. So thank you to Kamiko again. But yeah, give me a little bit of time, Director Robertson, and I'll provide, maybe we could do a postmortem.
Sorry, Kamiko.
Post-mortem.
He's with
Kamiko's with
Bailey.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes,
Gotcha.
sorry.
I may not have a fresh perspective. I think stale, I
Give
guess.
us your stale, Mike.
But I do, one, thing that we've discussed already is just process. For whatever reason, one year after the next, I've always tried to move the budget development process further back in the fiscal year, give us more time, and there's always stuff that comes up that pushes us, further out. Like Kelly and I think are
We're on the same page.
on the same page on that front, that it is going to start a lot earlier, next year than it did this year. And I think a more methodical process with more time for QA/QC and more, so we don't have to rush decisions or moving parts, kind of leading into a board meeting. We always try to avoid those things when it's something as complex and as important as this. So I think process is one thing where we have room for improvement. The reserve, I think it's been great to get all the questions and the feedback about the reserves. And so we'll be bringing recommendations back to the finance committee to restructure the reserves and update really. There's a lot of updating that needs to happen there. So those are kind of two things that come to mind for me, but I also look forward to sage words. When you're ready.
When I'm ready. Perfect. Any other questions?
Board?
All right, this is an informational item, but we will open up for public comment. I would appreciate 3 minutes, but I don't like cutting people off today. Unless you go 4.
Francisco de la Cruz. I had some comments about the special project transfers that I think she's answered, but they add up to about 2 million. I did have a question about the hydro operating budget on page D1 showing transfers out reserves to be 0. And then in the fund balance, hydropower transfers out a negative 409,000. I don't know what that's about. But the bigger picture for me is this. Back in May, in the engineering committee meeting, I think everyone agreed that we could really improve the data we use to make decisions, especially data related to our assets, how they're working, et cetera. That process, I think, has just started or is going to start, but it's not going to be available for us to use their outputs to see if we're picking the right projects. I don't know if after they're done doing what they're going to do, the list that the engineering department created would be significantly different. But I'd sure as hell feel a lot better about it because I know that it's database, not, I think it's the best we can do. We've actually gone out and checked it out. So I would again encourage you to consider waiting for that before you make final decisions. Lastly, the cost of service 2023 that laid down the rules that, and I'm a rule follower, HR guys, they follow rules. So do engineers, and I'm both. And when you all said that you're not going to earn but 1.5% on interest, and you're really sitting on $16 million out there, which is what, 4 to 5 times the amount that this little rate step increase is going to give you to invest. Politically, I think it would gain you significant positive points to forego those $8 a month. It doesn't break the bank. It doesn't create significant danger of something falling apart. but your community would certainly appreciate the fact that they were taken into consideration when you said, you know what? We don't need to spend the money that fast. We've got more than enough reserves to cover our needs, to cover the planned CIP, and there's still a few years left before this thing wraps up. Things could change. I would encourage you to seriously consider pausing the July 16th rate. Thank you.
Other public comment?
Yes, Mike Rogers again. Good afternoon. Thank you, Kelly and Damon, for the presentation. Very helpful. I also want to thank Michael and Kelly for the in-depth overview of the reserves and the reserve policy that you did a few weeks ago. I appreciate that. I have a much better understanding of where we are with those funds. So I appreciate that deeper dive that you did a while ago. What I'm struggling with, I'm trying to reconcile the rate increase as planned for this year with non-operating revenues for water increase of about 30% and non-operating revenues for wastewater of 40% over prior year. Recognizing that operating revenue are 5.8%, 5.6% each, which include the planned rate increase. So parsing it a little further, it looks like we had a big bump in property tax revenue. Is that a kind of a one-of situation, or what maybe triggered that substantial increase in property tax revenues for wastewater and water? And if it's just a one-of, okay, I get it. But if it isn't, and when we look at these projected revenues, and the other thing I'll add is that we saw a decrease in operating and maintenance expenditures of 2%. So you had a decline in operating O&M expense of 2.2%. I'm having a difficult time reconciling why this rate increase is necessary when you have these kinds of increases in non-operating revenues. It's really head scratching. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, other public comment in the room? Online?
Roxanne.
All right, Roxanne, 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I agree with Francisco and Mike. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne. Any other public comment online? Seeing none. Kelly, you want to add anything at the end of this? Anything to add? Michael?
I can respond to questions offline if you'd prefer, or I can give a quick response.
Give a real quick
Yeah,
response.
so there's no significant increase in non-operating revenue. Property taxes definitely don't go up that quickly. Without looking at it more closely, but Kelly or Kamiko, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've changed the way that we route some of the infrastructure funding that we're using, including that special project revenue. And so I think that is what accounts for that change, because we want to make sure that when we way that is used, we capture that in calculating our debt service coverage ratio, so we're not undercounting revenue when it comes to debt service. So I think it's not a significant increase in non-operating revenue. It's a change in cash flow. And then the asset management effort that we're doing is a multi-year effort. And what we talked about in the engineering committee is like step one of that effort. And the output of that step one is not going to be a significant overhaul of our CIP. It is going to be a gap analysis and a tech memo to help us chart the path for improving asset management over time. But I think our team has already done a really good job of identifying projects and prioritizing. And that's the other short answer is, even where we try to be as cost conscious as we can in the operating budget, and our labor costs have gone down. Our operating costs are as low as we can make them. What drives the need for revenue is infrastructure, and that's why we spent time today talking about not only the CIP projects that are not funded, but the projects that aren't even on the CIP that aren't funded, because there's more aging infrastructure that needs to be replaced than we can afford, even with these rate increases. So we'd just be digging ourselves a deeper hole if we're not implementing rate increases on a regular basis.
Very well. We are completed that item. We'll bring that back for budget. No, we've already done public comment, Francisco. So you guys could take it up afterwards. I'm sorry. All right, moving on.
I'm sorry that Francisco walked out of here. He used the phrase of political impact. And I've been serving on various boards and in this capacity for a long, long time. And I can remember distinctly when boards reject the hard work of the staff making recommendations. There's a political impact of ignoring that. People tend to vote with their feet, and they leave the organization when you don't reward their efforts with an acknowledgement that they know what they're doing. We certainly don't have a grasp of the nuts and bolts of daily activities around here, but I trust the information that I've gotten here. I don't know. I also remember going through a couple of rate hearings. One comment that stands out in my memory is a lady that stood up and said, "Well, damn it, if you had raised rates last time more, you wouldn't have to raise them so much now." And that just really resonated with me, that if we don't take the recommendation of our staff and do what they say that we're supposed to do, and then as a result of that, we have to raise 7% more next time we raise it. It's you're chasing your tail. So is that you were on a soapbox earlier, Michael? So that I can get off my soapbox now. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. We will move on to item 6A, External Affairs. Kelly's got a brief presentation.
Ooh.
Let's hope.
Good afternoon.
Brief.
All right, I'll try to keep it brief. I'll try not to get too excited, but I am excited. Yesterday was my son's birthday. Tonight's my daughter's graduation, so I want to get out of here as much as you guys do. Both of whom were raised on CCWD water, I might add. Yeah, I'm going to start actually with getting the controller to work. Oh yeah, you mentioned good stuff. I'm going to start with some good stuff. We just kicked off our summer work program. Last week we did our interviews for it. There was 33 students that applied. We gave interviews to 25 of them. And still that process is my second year doing it, and it's still the hardest thing I've ever done in my 25-year career here, is picking 4 students out of these 25 amazing individuals. It is truly, truly difficult. But it just reminds me too of how wonderful of a program it is. Typically when you're interviewing someone, you want the best and the brightest, and this is still that case. But you're also looking at some of the students that this might be their first interview. You can tell they're shy, you can tell they're nervous, and you also want to give the opportunity to that, the diamond in the rough who's just not done this yet. And also, I think it's a great opportunity to expose our industry to the students. So it's just a great program. We did select 4. We'll be kicking it off pretty soon. But again, I wish we could pick them all. I was going to mention this in the external relations report last time, but I totally forgot to. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Story Maps, Esri. Esri is the pretty much industry leading GIS software used around the world. They have this great program called Story Maps. So you can do all sorts. You can just pretty much tell a story through maps. And they had this new portion of it called Frames, and it was a more mobile version. And so the C transmission main, I started messing with this and I made a story map and I made the Frames version. It's more formatted for your phone, just kind of learning how to use it. Again, it's still in beta. And then a few weeks later, Rebecca sends me an email where Esri had reached out to her saying that they had found our story map and wanted to use it. They didn't really anticipate it being used in a construction outreach type of way. And so they requested access to it and the rights to be able to use it in their own social media and in their own way of showcasing what that program can be. So I was pretty proud of that. Again, it was kind of the first time I had used that portion of the story maps, and I thought it was great. So this is kind of that story map. It goes through the entire project, kind of the background of it, purpose of it. It's self-scrolling just to kind of show you what it would look like. And then again, some of the traffic impacts I had up on there. But when they reached out to us, I thought of that as an honor. Again, this is a world-class, software that discovered little old Calaveras County.
Discovered how to use it pretty well, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's a great program. And then Arnold Wastewater, I know they touched on it, but I went out there during the groundbreaking and I took a whole bunch of different drone shots and actually GPSed it. So as they're doing more stuff, I'm going to try to go back to that same location and create a time lapse of that project. I think that'll be really useful as we just communicate the progress of that project. Just last week, we did the Mountain County's Legislative Advocacy Day. Really kind of the same format as we did last year. Before, when we've done these, we've actually spent the time going from office to office with the different legislators. This time we were in one room. It's kind of like speed dating. They all come to us every 30 minutes. Either an assemblyman or staff from different offices come and talk to us, and we hear the same thing throughout the day. So it's kind of repetitive, but again, it's not repetitive for the folks that we're speaking to. One of the things I think we talk about constantly is in the Mountain Counties in the area, we pretty much supply 60% of the surface area to all of California. If you really touch into some of the southern Cascades up there, it's actually closer to 75%. But really in the footprint of the Sierra Nevada, we obviously supply much of the water. And I think that's what we're trying to communicate to these folks that don't even realize where their water is coming from. And we heard from several of the folks that they truly don't know where it comes from. But like I said, I'm hearing the same pitch every half hour, and I'm starting to think of what else can we do to tell that message, to remind them of where their water comes from. And I keep thinking about also what else does the headwaters supply for the state of California? And I'm trying to find that energy nexus of it as well. And so here's an Esri GIS layer of all the hydroelectric facilities within the footprint. The dark blue is the Mountain County's footprint. The light blue is all the watersheds that touch that footprint. And there is all the hydroelectric facilities within it. I haven't finished this, but I want to quantify that more. And one thing that came to mind was, let's say we all know the Super Bowl was just recently in Santa Clara. How can we find out how much energy was used from hydroelectric maybe for that event? So what else can we tie our headwaters and the health of our headwaters to get these legislators to understand, and just other folks from around the state to understand the importance of a healthy watershed? So this is the map I'm working on. I think it's impactful. When you look at all the hydroelectric facilities across the state, this is just the Sierra Nevada. The majority of them are obviously in the Sierra Nevada or from those headwaters. The vision for our water, I touched on this last time. I want to thank the board for supporting this. I think this is a really good initiative. Out of the 4 different objectives, there's 3 working groups on this. I am part of the Protect Affordability Working Group. Our first meeting will be next Tuesday, which I believe is the 2nd. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll report out on that as well. We'll be meeting every 2 weeks for that working group. Firewise events, seems like there's a lot of them right now. I reported on the West Point one not too long ago. The one I just went to on May 2nd was the Firewise event at Ebbets Pass. That one has really taken off over the last few years. I was on a panel. Unfortunately, no questions came my way. Most of them were home hardening, but I always, I'm looking forward to those panel questions. However, just being part of the crowd and having a little booth there, you get a lot of folks come up and talk to you. Just about every time I go to an event like this, I always get the same one, which is why is my water bill so high? And it's a great opportunity to really talk it through. And one woman in particular on this, by the end of the conversation, she's told me she will never complain about her water bill again because of just that interaction, really having that one-on-one, being able to explain it. So valuable, even if I only have one conversation at an event like that, it is valuable because if next time someone complains to her, she is now equipped with some of this information and she's ready to kind of, say, you know what I learned? Here's actually what's going on with this water system. The 5 bugles, this was kind of born out of the CSDA Calaveras chapter. The last chapter meeting, several of the fire chiefs from around the county, most of them were at that meeting, and that was at their direction. They asked to be put on the agenda. Mike Rogers, you were there as well. I thought it was a very good meeting. Actually, the component of water and fire started to take over the meeting, so they wanted to start another working group. And then they invited us to the 5 Bugles meeting, which I just learned is kind of not a secret meeting, but it's the main meeting with all the fire chiefs throughout the county. And they invited all the water agencies. Only myself and UPUD did go to it, but one of the things that the first fire chief, right when I got there, said, "Oh, are you here to talk about my water bill?" It goes back to that, which I love because I want to make sure that I'm continually trying to communicate. We're not just associated with the water bill. We associate firefighters with protecting the community, saving lives, all the things. I want us to be associated with more than just what you get every 2 months to pay for. We're associated with public health. We're associated with fire flow. We're associated with the community. Again, communities wouldn't be here without water and wastewater services. So a great meeting. It was an honor to be there. Calaveras Library. Next week, I have a meeting with the Calaveras Library Board. I had this idea to maybe try to get at all the different libraries throughout the county to tell our story, whether it's just to communicate it, whether it's telling the story of our anniversary year, where your water comes from, just get those one-on-ones. And I thought a library might be a great an avenue to do that. I have a good relationship with the woman who runs the Arnold Library, and I'm already scheduled for that, but she thought it'd be good to speak to the whole board to see if I can get in with each and every library throughout the county. I'm not going to go into all this for time, but I had the Historical Society, and every chance I get to throughout this year, I'm going to be talking about the history. So another great water plan. I've shown you this map. But one thing I wanted to say was when this plan was developed in 1961, of course, we didn't build all this, but the estimated cost for that plan in 1961 was almost $200 million to really build it out. So again, out of respect for time, I'm not going to go through everything, but I'd love to at some point.
$1961?
$1961. So again, this is what I walked through during that Historical Society meeting. I walked through basically that entire watershed because that meeting was held in Jenny Lind. So it was an opportunity to really walk from the top of the watershed all the way to Jenny Lind. But during that, during looking into the history, of course, I'm finding all sorts of stuff. I'm going to skip through this, but sewer. I don't think we really talk about sewer enough. A lot of times we talk about water rights, watersheds, all this stuff, but sewer is really, truly, I think, what makes or breaks a community. And it was identified, CCWD was not started to be in the sewer business. It was really in the mid-60s, late 60s that Calaveras County, Chamber of Commerce really approached CCWD and said, we need to do something about our sewer, or else this community will never, ever grow and prosper. And so this report goes through all the different service areas. There was 8 sanitary sewer systems at the time. And, the report talks about all the different ones, not just Calaveras County ones. So again, in light of time, I'm trying to speed through this. But the 2 areas that were really critical and identified that we're going to be truly in trouble without any kind of sewer system was West Point and the Arnold and Avery area. So, the Arnold and Avery area was growing so fast, and there would have been no growth without the sewer system. The middle school that I went to, Hazel Fisher School, there'd be no school. There'd be no White Pines. There'd be no Big Trees Park. Not Big Trees Park, but Big Trees shopping center there, the main grocery store. So again, there was this report included the Chamber of Commerce and the county really pleading with Calaveras County Water District to step in and help design and build these sewer systems. There's a lot to that I would really love to dive in more, which I'll be touching on once I dive into more of the history. Another great map. Every time I turn the corner and look for something else, I find something awesome like this. So with that also, this Saturday, I have a Forest Meadows HOA Town Hall. They invited us to come out, so I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be on Saturday, May 30th. Yeah, so as many of these town halls, anytime folks like this reach out, I would love to go out there. I'm really looking forward to this one. I think, you know, with all the information that we have, all the CIP projects that are on the books, all the projects that we've done up there in Ebbets Pass historically will fit nicely with this group because we've done a ton of projects that directly impact them. You know, and another thing that I think is interesting about Forest Meadows, if you guys are familiar with Forest Meadows, it's virtually all lava cap. Another place that septic systems would not work in that ground. So Forest Meadows wouldn't be there without sewer. That's it. I thought that was pretty fast, pretty good.
Very good, Kelly. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good job.
Much appreciated. Interesting stuff.
That 197 million is $0.2 billion.
Yeah,
So
it's big thinking.
once we have more time, I have it broken down into each little zone. And again, I was going to talk through what the reservoirs were, what they would have done, you know, so next time when we have a little more time. So
We could always come in for lunch and watch you talk.
awesome. All right.
Thank you
Kelly.
very much, Kelly.
After what Director Davison just said, it would be interesting to pick a bill from a long time ago and say it was $7.49 for a 1 month bill. But if you adjusted for inflation, I wouldn't be surprised if it was on a percentage basis more than it is today. It would be an interesting
Yeah.
thing to have in your
Would be. And then, Kevin mentioned earlier Hathaway Pines. You know, Hathaway Pines that he referenced as being one of our older systems was actually our very, very first water system ever. So that was our first water system, Hathaway Pines.
And you work there?
No, I've worked on the system.
Jeff
but
is
not-
on the board.
Yeah. Any questions?
I was bored then too.
We're trying.
Particularly when you make your presentations up in the Ebbets Pass area where your old stomping grounds, when you had a shovel in your hand, do you tell them how long you've been with the district and how you're, it's obvious that you have an enthusiasm for what you're doing, but I mean, aren't you the longest standing employee here, and you're still energetic and enthusiastic, and my hat's off to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I probably do tend to talk too much about the Ebbets Pass. It's just in my blood. I try not to. I mean, but that's, like I said, I try to spread out the love, but I love everything about CCWD. So,
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right. General Manager's report.
All right.
You
if
got a
think-
brief report
if you
for
think
us.
that was fast. Here we go. And part because Kelly touched on a couple of things I was going to touch on. And in true to form, Kelly gets to talk about all the fun stuff where I get to report out on the fact that we have just found out we have a Tyler billing issue unfolding right now. So for customers are receiving twice the normal bill, unfortunately. So I just want to give people a heads up on that we're working as quickly as we can to resolve it with Tyler, and but you're bound to hear about it. So want to make sure to make that announcement and just let people know we're aware of it, and we're working to undo it as quickly as we can. And we'll have more info once we know more about how it all happened.
Did I understand you to say that the customers are receiving a bill that's twice as large as it should be?
Right.
Well, that's timely.
That's right.
How many?
Never a good time for
Did
that
they-
kind of
did
thing.
everybody get one?
I think so. Well, this billing cycle. So
Going where?
Kelly, are we Jenny Lynn, Copper, and West Point? Okay.
Jenny Land, Copper, and West.
And tell me how we are fixing this.
We've been informed that Tyler, our software provider, there was a glitch in their system. So they're working to unwrap it and undo it. So I'm not sure what it looks like. We just got word that this happened. So we just wanted to spread the word that people don't owe 2 bills. They only owe 1 bill. And
I assume Kelly is working on that. We're communicating with
yes,
people.
we're about to post it on the website right now.
And we're going to,
Are they receiving two bills of the exact same amount?
So
or the
a
amount-
duplicate bill.
The duplicate, so it
Yeah.
looks like people are getting two separate bills.
So it's mailed twice. It's costing us the mailing.
Don't know
twice.
that the mailing has happened. This
Yeah,
is
it's
all
probably-
very preliminary
We'll have to
information.
confirm, but it's the electronic version.
I'm assuming it's the electronic version.
Mm.
Yes.
add,
It's bad. Yeah, but not.
All right, well, we're working on it, so.
Yes, it will be resolved quickly.
The legal affairs meets next week. We had to move that meeting to Thursday, which I now have a conflict on, so I have to talk to legal affairs committee again about whether we go ahead with that one. External relations is scheduled for June 15th. And then budget has been a huge undertaking. But looking forward to revisiting some of the billing issues we've talked about, strategic plan, the reserve policy overhaul. So there's a series of things that we're looking forward to turning the page to once we get through budget. And then just briefly, lastly, I just want to touch on the summer work program. And remember that was something we restarted in memory of Dylan Cuneo. Dylan and Kelly G both started here when they were still in high school. And so we tragically lost Dylan and want to make sure we are creating opportunities for high schoolers going forward to be introduced to working at CCWD or be introduced to working in the water industry. So just a reminder on that front. That's all I had.
board reports. Yeah, we'll go down the line. Jeffrey.
Yeah, I missed, of course, the last meeting, but I wanted to go back for a brief moment to Aqua meeting in Sacramento, and there was one particular session I sat in on about a water district grant, to be exact, and they had a cyber attack. They thought they were really up to speed, and there's kind of two things I actually, Michael, would like to ask you with asking Dylan whether every single software patch that's supposed to be out is on every single computer. That turned to be the pathway into which the Iranian hackers were able to get into the Fryant system and hold them up for an $800,000, whatever you want to call it, bribe to get their information back. And then secondly, that was suggested, it was a great panel with an expert from the FBI, a computer hacker himself, and then someone who was somewhat of the equivalent of Michael Bryant sitting on the thing. And one of the things she'd said is like 92% of the people had their software patches up to date, but there was a couple of people that were in the field that didn't feel they needed them. They were paying, it slowed down their work. They had important work to do, and they didn't get the patches done. And anyway, it turned out to be a huge issue. But the other thing is, there are people you hire who try to break into your system, and the FBI strongly recommended that you penetration
testing. We have done that in the past, and we have money in the budget to ramp up on that front in this coming year. And Dylan is generally on top of it, but I will get back to you on those questions.
Thank you.
And another thing on that, the other person sat on that panel was Hunter Sargent from the JPIA, cyber expert. I mean, we worked with the FBI, not on that. He wasn't on the Bryant one, but he's also a great source. And the JPIA does have two systems that are working in the background, and they test our system. They test everyone who's in that coverage. Cyber coverage is tested, and if they don't pass, they're contacted, and they're not in that. They don't have that coverage anymore until they bring their system up to date. That's another. It's not they're not hackers trying to get in, but they are testing the system for a level of vulnerability, and if they don't meet that level, well, they're contacted first, and everybody brings it up to the. That was a
great presentation.
Yeah.
One of the AI ability to penetrate has gone up. Pretty scary.
Scott.
Kelly and Michael have hit on most of the things the Ledge Day, the legal affairs meeting next week, external relations coming up. I did go to Mountain County's had a City of Roseville tour. And we did check out one of their wastewater plants and a ASR well. And the ASR well was amazing. I mean, I really, it's just pumping. It's not really pumping water. It's just flowing into the ground, and they know it's measured. They know how much is in there. They know how much they're putting in every day. They know the level changes of it. They're never going to fill up this aquifer that's greatly depleted. But that was very, very interesting concept on an ASR well. And I wanted to thank you, Kevin, for when you mentioned the regulator reservoir, you called it Bummerville, and that's a huge step in this building. I really appreciate that.
Make you local up there yet?
And and this is something that Director Thomas may get to, but the staple in the operating revised budget is also goes coming out of my book here. So this is another staple comment. We could do better with staples.
Thank you, Scott.
What's
Jeff?
wrong with it?
I really don't have much, but I would kind of like what Jeff's comment about about rates from years back and the inflation. Because if it was $18 in 1961, would be $201 today. I don't recall. I mean, I can't remember what my water bill was when I first moved here in '90, but it wasn't cheap. Be interesting to see that.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yep. Russ?
Particularly when the room gets filled with.
Next week, yeah. Next month.
I don't have anything.
If nothing to report, I want to thank the staff again. I'm sorry, not sorry that I'm in your business on the budget all the time. I'll get to know each other better that way.
We appreciate it, honestly.
I'm learning a lot. Thank
Yeah,
you
it's
for
great.
your patience. All right, we're going to go into closed session. Next board meeting is June 10th at 1 p.m. Meeting after that is June 24th at 1 p.m. We will now be recessing into a closed session, and we report afterwards and close out this meeting.
Public comment on closed session, and Stacy, please join us.
Thank you. Any public comment on the closed session items in the room? Online? Going once, going twice. Very well. We are recessed.
Meet here or somewhere else.